Hello.
Yep. Your mic's
Hey.
quiet.
Oh, my mic's quiet. Okay,
Actually, that's okay. It's better.
Are you sure? Is everything fine? I'll turn. Right, that's great.
Whoops. Hold on.
Well,
How did he get in here? It's gonna be a vegan debate. Oh god.
yeah, thanks for the invite, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think Steven's screaming and yelling at his audience right now.
Sorry, hold on. Some guy
Well,
about digging trenches.
They take their trenches very seriously in that community.
there's a lot of trench digging extravagance going on at the minute, isn't there, with Wagner and Ukraine and all that anyway, so.
True.
So yeah, well, thank you for the conversation. Really quite unexpected. I'm happy to have the opportunity.
So,
How have you been?
originally, real quick, the plan was that we were just gonna have a panel where we were gonna talk about every Tuesday we go over everything that's happened over the last week. A bunch of different content creators jump on. A bunch of people wanted to talk about the whatever podcast debate that Destiny had. So that was scheduled for 9 o'clock tonight. I invited Destiny to come on and have the conversation as well, but he wasn't able to make it. Wanted to make it earlier, and so this is who all could make it earlier today. It turns out to be a little bit odd when, I guess I'm pro-life. He's a freaking vegan. Destiny's very pro-choice and bases that off of consciousness. So I figured we could at least start talking about the consciousness part first, and then maybe just see where it goes from there. Because I feel like you two are pro-choice, so I feel like I'm gonna be the odd man out here. So I
Oh,
might just
I'm not pro-choice. I'm not.
Oh, you're
pro-choice
not
at all.
pro-choice.
Oh no,
Oh.
no, 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 no. If anything, I'm closer to pro-life. But I'm a sentientist, so I'm somewhere in between, really. So, yeah, I think we're actually kind of a good mix because we probably represent the entire spectrum in a way, which is characteristic of various viewpoints. So, I mean, obviously you've got your sort of you two on the far extremes, and then I would call for a severely lessened, like a lower barrier to abortion, or rather lower cutoff for abortion. Maybe even as low as 8 weeks, depending on where research goes. But 13 weeks, 11 to 13 weeks.
11 to 13 weeks. Damn. Okay, yeah. I'm end of first trimester. I base it off of being human and being alive. Having a heartbeat and brain function is when we consider you dead. Or if you don't have a heartbeat and brain function, we consider you dead. So I think once you have a heartbeat and brain function, we consider you alive. So as long as you're human and alive, I think that we give you that value. So mine's first trimester, end of first trimester. And then Destiny, what was yours again?
Mine is as soon as I think you have a conscious experience.
And that happens between 18 to 22 weeks?
Between 20 to 28 weeks, so I just say stop at 20 weeks.
Because I think the main difference is how we're even approaching what consciousness is, and I think that's probably the best way to see how this is how we're categorizing it. I think Destiny, if I'm correct, I don't. Do you want? Is it better I call you Stephen or Destiny? By the way, I still don't know whether to.
Either one is fine. Okay, Steven's fine.
Either one's fine. Okay. So I think Stephen wants to say that it is cortex development, that the sort of right parts of the brain start communicating, and now we have the first emergence of human consciousness. The question is, would you say that it was conscious before that and it wasn't a human level of consciousness, or is it because I think you want to say that it just wasn't conscious and then it becomes conscious, right?
Yeah, it wasn't conscious and then it becomes conscious.
Right. And to clarify, I think that that's not exactly the best way of approaching it. I think from what we've seen in terms of the evidence that we have, the only reason that we would really attribute cortex development to consciousness is based off a few different sort of presuppositions in the field. that have since been questioned quite radically. One such basically presupposition is that higher functions are necessary for conscious experience, where there seems to be neurological experiments, sort of freak cases that show the alternative, where people have lost large parts of their brain but appear conscious, or they've had their brain severed, in the sense like in the split brain experiments, and there seems to arise two distinct conscious experiences, or possibly two distinct conscious experiences. Um, there's also how we collect and understand brain development in the first place. So the reason that we would even attribute sort of consciousness to the human brain is really based off people saying like, all right, you're conscious, right? Like I'm conscious, and then me attributing consciousness to another, and then going, okay, well, if we just assume that they're conscious and scan their brain, we can now basically affirm that this is the structure necessary for consciousness. And so the reason that we'll kind of say cortex development is because it has the closest sort of in terms of development, it's what we would consider a sort of fully operational brain that we're attributing consciousness to. But that's really just based off sort of reports, which are already based off behavioral analysis. So we've already kind of attributed consciousness to the subject before we then ad hoc it to the brain state, or rather the brain structure in the first place. So I'm just wondering why you say 24 weeks, given that sort of issue, like in terms of actually collecting when a being is conscious.
I have never heard in my entire life another proposal for where consciousness comes from other than the brain. The prefrontal cortex, I guess, of the brain.
I mean, no one's even. I'm assuming, like, Tom, do you actually have an issue with consciousness coming from the brain, or?
No.
So let's all assume we all agree that consciousness emanates from a fully functioning brain, whether it's like whether you're someone as far as Castrope, where it's it's a sort of what's he called it, like a basically detector for consciousness, or basically a way that consciousness sort of attunes itself and manifests through this metabolized structure, or it's just a straight up physicalist where it's an emergent property, and let's say it's even epiphenomenal, right? It's not even causal. Like either way, we're probably going to affirm it's connected to a brain somehow. The real question is, why are we affirming it's connected to the brain at specifically the point of 20 weeks in cortex development, when behavioral analysis was a prerequisite to the attribution in the first place? So if I've already affirmed that someone is conscious and then said, well, this is what a conscious brain looks like, why can't I just go back to the behavioral analysis rather than strictly base it off this?
Because we could probably imagine a bunch of behavior that would probably be insufficient to establish a conscious experience.
Like what?
Like I could create a robot with some rudimentary functions that could mimic certain types of behavior, but I don't know if we would say that that particular thing is conscious.
Why would we say that it's not conscious, though?
Because the faculty needed to process all of the higher order things, all of the abstract emergent things that are happening in a conscious experience aren't there. It's just a couple of rudimentary processes that are moving a thing from point A to point B. Unless for you that's enough to say it's a conscious thing because it can move something.
Well, no, I just think it's enough to say that we could start saying that, like, the more complex something like that becomes, like a predictive engine, it could become something capable of passing a Turing test.
Do you think that all consciousness
hold on,
is the same?
Or I don't think a Turing test has anything to do with consciousness. And then just because something is complicated, I don't know if we would say it's conscious. Like we can probably think of a lot of complicated things that aren't conscious. Like a rock rolling down a hill can take a million different potential paths, or like we can think of a lot of things that are complicated or chaotic that aren't conscious, I would imagine, no?
Yeah, I would agree, but I think that we would see that the difference is whether they are emanating not just base reactions, like the way that a plant or a microorganism would, where it's a set response to stimuli, or whether it's
what is the difference
behavior.
between a set response to stimuli, a behavior, or reaction? Aren't these all?
So I would say that I would say that the difference between like a behavior and a mere reaction seems to be the capacity to relate to one's external environment, make problem solve, make a decision, sort of either I would say discriminate in relation to one's environment, recognize one's environment, and then make a response in relation to an end goal based off that what could be a change in the environment. So you would see like
Yeah, I understand. I
I
don't
don't
need an
know.
example. I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, but couldn't all of these things just be complicated chains of reactions, big if-then chain statements?
Yeah, I mean, but that's what a like a Pavlovian or a Skinner would say was a human, right? That it was we are a complex behavioral machine, and that consciousness is epiphenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, I mean, are you a hard determinist?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I noticed you brought this up last time in the vegan gains debate, in terms of like you said like a dog could just be having a Pavlovian response versus a human having like the semantic understanding, meaning the qualitative response. But if you're a hard determinist, at one, I don't know why that would matter, and two, it seems that it seems to be beyond the point. It doesn't like the whole point of Father Pavlovian isn't to say that these beings aren't conscious. It's just to say that consciousness as a emergent property would be just a essentially a complicated if then what is it, a sort of pattern recognition system responding to value structures that were given to it by nature.
It seems
Um,
difficult to build consciousness out of if-then statements, the experience of consciousness out of just if-then statements. Like, how is my experience right now, my meta-reflection of myself, how is that just if-then statements? That seems hard to...
Well, I would agree. I mean, I'm not the. I would say I'm not a Pavlovian or like a Skinner in the first place. But I think that what they're essentially arguing is that through the relation of external stimuli. So if it's like so for example, like what about would your experience would you say would be too complex for a sophisticated predictive engine? Let's say something far exceeding ChatGPT, right? Let's say like an order of 100 of something like ChatGPT couldn't essentially project an environment and then react to it based off reserving memory and like a memory reserve, a memory bank of like previous responses, and then building up the complexity of those responses into a lived experience, which would, I mean, surely you could imagine that you would have everything from a psychological continuity, that you could have a relationship to environment, that you would learn from that relationship to the environment, that your predictions may
I understand what you're
manifest
saying, but
sort of,
everything you're
yeah.
doing is a behavioral analysis. I don't think that, like I said, we can create a sufficiently complicated script on a computer to have behavior, but I don't think people would ever feel like a conscious experience arises from the behavior.
I mean, I would agree. I would agree that we would say that we would want to say that language and even behavior itself indicates something other than itself, that is sort of a deeper level, which I think you would call a qualia. I just want to know why you would say that a being which is like I'd rather that why we would even say that all of that wouldn't why the qualia wouldn't come from that anyway. Like it's like for you it seems like this is a very physicalist approach. This is like a very behavioralist form of analysis in which there's no like sort of spirit or sort of
I don't.
anything
I
other
guess,
than
hold on.
just.
To simplify this down, I don't understand. It sounds like you're saying that, like, why can't a bunch of behaviors just be called consciousness? That sounds like the simplified version of what you're saying, right?
No, I'm just saying like why can't consciousness emerge from behaviors? Like since we seem to
Because
basically
it just
rely
doesn't.
upon behavior.
That doesn't seem to be possible. I can't imagine that without some immaterial thing. Again, I can create rudimentary behaviors with a script that's 30 lines long, but it seems hard to imagine that there's a conscious experience happening there.
But I don't know what I just think it's sort of like ruling it out in the sense of like we're just saying it's not an intuitive, based on the fact that we are having an experience. But if that experience is essentially just like a behavioral, like I'm not an epiphenomenalist. I just want to point out that even if we did say that dogs are pure Pavlovian, that like will go the absolute like hard materialist Pavlovian way of going about things. I'm just wondering why this is like a dog is just this scripted engine with consciousness, because you said they were conscious, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But you just said they didn't have our kind of consciousness. And then you have our kind of consciousness. And I'm just trying to work out what that difference is, how it relates to the structure of the brain, and also cannot be detected through a form of behavioral analysis. Because really, that's what we'll have to say. Because otherwise,
Wait, what do we
could
have to
attribute
say
it.
this for? Yeah, what are you attributing it for?
Yeah, because otherwise, at 20 weeks, we could say that before 20 weeks, there is significant behaviors that we could start to attribute consciousness to either a non-human or a human level, in your sort of vernacular. And if it's not the behaviors, then the question is, why are we even attributing it to these structures in the first place? Since our recognition of behaviors is how we recognize consciousness in fully formed adults.
Well,
Which
I don't think we're recognizing
used to.
behaviors. I think we're also recognizing like the brain structure, like functioning, right? Like for instance, the behavior
Yeah.
of a sleeping person on its face might look similar to the behavior of a dead person. Let's assume we can make the dead person breathe, but we can like hook machines up to a brain and look at like electrical signals and say, oh, it looks like there's activity here, so it's different.
Yeah, I would agree, but I mean, like, why do we attribute, like, for example, the whole point is, like, why do we attribute those electrical signals in the brain with consciousness or specific experiences? And it's because we'll take someone when they're sleeping and we'll go, all right, they're asleep, they're not dead, they might be dreaming or whatever. In the same way when we look at an animal when it's moving and it's sleeping, and we'll go, oh, it's dreaming. And then we'll put them in an MRI scanner, and we'll map out the through magnetic resonance the electrical signals in the brain, and we'll be like, this is the conscious experience of someone they're sleeping. This is how the brain works when someone's sleeping, and there is like dreaming happening here. So it's the same way that we would go, this is a fully conscious individual having an experience of X. Let's scan their brain. Now we have an indication of what's going on in the brain when they're having the experience of X. Like what we're doing prior to scanning their brain is relying upon their reports, and it's kind of an impossible task to get out of, because otherwise, like, look at it like this: we could just assume everyone was a P zombie. Everyone but yourself is a P zombie, a predictive engine which has evolved complex social behaviors in order to survive. They're willing to tell you they're conscious. You scan their brain, you gain the exact same information. Like, you just have to trust their report. It's because it's basically the hard problem of consciousness.
Okay, I don't. What is the alternative, or what is the point of this line of inquiry? I guess I've never thought to think of like maybe consciousness just arises from simple behaviors or whatever. I don't know what the value is, or I don't even know what the point is of this line of inquiry. Like, what are we trying to establish, or what are we going down?
The point is why we would basically say, in one case, behavioral analysis in relation to two humans going into a neurological experiment is sufficient to say that consciousness exists prior to the experiment beginning, and as a precedent for the experiment to have any clinical, or rather any sort of scientific validity. So like basically you are conscious, let's make an experiment to look at consciousness. And we do that through behavioral analysis. But when it comes to knowing whether a fetus is conscious, we have to rely upon a fully functioning or a fully integrated brain. I just don't see why we would use one standard for entering into the form of analysis and then use another standard for the, like a fetus, for example.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't understand the line of inquiry. It feels like we're on one end, you're hitting at the idea that it feels like you're asking me this question. If I see a person in public and they talk like a man, they look like a man, they act like a man, and then you say, isn't it strange that you determine that that person's a man, but at birth you have to see their dick? Isn't that hypocritical? That sounds like what you're saying. Like, for a normal person, I'm assuming they're conscious based on a set of behaviors, but I'm assuming that those behaviors are proxying something happening in the brain. If I were to later find out that the underlying brain things didn't exist, I might feel differently about the behaviors, like they're a doppelganger or a robot or something. But just because I'm able to ascertain whether or not I think somebody's having a conscious experience because I'm using behaviors as a proxy for brain activity, I don't think that that necessarily means that all of consciousness is ad hoc to brain activity, and now when I'm analyzing brain activity in the womb, it's somehow some arbitrary thing and I should be still looking at behaviors. I just don't understand the line of inquiry. I don't understand that.
I'm not saying that brain activity is entirely arbitrary. What I'm saying is that at the point of like let's say when you're at the street and you look at someone and you ascertain they're conscious, you're like, oh, there's someone walking down the street. You don't think, oh, that's a very complicated like machine that looks like a human. It's a synth or something walking down the street, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you have any reason to believe that. That's fair enough. But neither did any of the scientists essentially going into the neurological studies when we were attributing consciousness to brain states in the first place. So when we were reducing, like, essentially consciousness to these specific brain states, the whole point was that they used a form of behavioral analysis, assumed those people were conscious, and created these studies.
Yeah, sure.
So behavioral
but then
analysis
afterwards,
is
but I
the
mean, but then
foundation.
afterwards, if we modify the brain, it seems we modify the brain state. We modify the conscious state, right?
Yes, I would agree.
So doesn't that seem that if we were to guess that, like, let's say that we assume that, like, wow, that guy's moving and his veins are throbbing, it must be some organ is pumping blood in his body. Maybe it's the heart. We just assume that without testing it. Then later on, we poke holes in the heart and we find out the blood doesn't pump as fast. Then isn't it fair to say, like, oh, okay, well, that assumption was correct. The blood is probably circulating because of the heart.
Absolutely. In the same way, like if you give someone like a psychedelic drug and they were to report that it has affected their consciousness, like work out what like chemical formula it is and you see how it affects the brain, then you know that it's going to have like a few different, then you can work out, you can start basically through clinical trials, like working out what would be like what chemicals might cause a psychedelic effect, like where you can basically say, yeah, actually don't take that acid unless you want to be tripping balls, right? Like yeah, that's fair enough. And that I would 100% agree with that. But the only reason that we would, like, the whole point is that when we are basing off this, we would basically say, based off people's like essentially behavioral responses in the first place, that's essentially all we have. Like in the sense, like, even when they report back to us in terms of language that their conscious experience has changed, like, let's say someone was to report back to you, let's say you've gave them acid and they report back to you like nothing has happened, absolutely nothing has happened, but their behavior is entirely erratic. You're like, no, something has definitely happened, and they affirm to you nothing has happened. Will you believe them or the behavioral analysis?
If I measure, wait, say that one more time.
So you give someone a drug,
Yes.
right? They enter into a state like that you believe that's going to be like a hallucinogenic state.
They get high, yeah.
They are, yeah. They take the drug. They say they're absolutely fine. Nothing's changed in their experience. Nothing's happened at all.
Mm-hmm.
But to you, their behaviors look like they're tripping balls. They're basically, or like, I don't know, like they've taken another drug and they're gurning their face off. Like, are you going to believe their behaviors or their report?
Believe it for what? Whether or not they are high? The fact of the matter, if they're high or not?
Yeah, whether their conscious experience has changed or not.
I'd probably believe the behavior.
Right, why?
Because the behavior indicates somebody who's high?
So the behavior indicates something about the conscious experience?
Yes.
But, okay, so if we accept that the behavior indicates something about the conscious experience, I'm just wondering why it doesn't in the fetus.
Well, hold on. Indicating an altered state of conscious experience is not indicating whether or not something is conscious at all.
No, but it indicates like a causative effect upon consciousness, where we can say that an external stimuli has had an effect upon a being, and their altered behavior shows that
sure,
a
but the
conscious
causative
experience
effect has to
changed.
do with the drug that is interacting with a part of the brain, right? And I'm looking at a fetus, I would be looking at that exact same part of the brain developing, no?
But I just don't understand, like look at it like this. The whole point of you saying that the part of the brain is the part that has consciousness is because we first had these reports and we've basically indicated, okay,
wait,
people
hold on. When
who
you say
have
reports,
consciousness-
we're talking about different things here. Somebody self-reporting whether or not they're high is not relying on a self-report that somebody's conscious, right?
I mean, it's the same thing. It's in terms of behavioral analysis or reporting. It does not matter.
I don't
It
think
really
we
does not. And
require
we're
a like somebody reporting to themselves saying, yes, I am conscious. I don't think we rely on that, no?
in terms of a neurological experiment, we absolutely do. Like, it would be saying, what kind of conscious experience are you having?
Or what kind of
Like, how do you
neurological
feel?
experience are you? I'm pretty sure that most of these are going to be measured with just, is it an EEG that you stick the electrodes on the head? I don't think we rely on the person to self-report their...
You can't measure a phenomenal experience with an EEG though, mate. Like, if I was to ask you, what is the experience of red like? You can't give, and show someone
Oh, sure,
an
I understand
experience.
that. Yeah, I guess I'm just not sure what kind of neurological experiments you're talking about, I guess.
I guess the point I'm saying is that, like, I'm assuming that this whole thing relies upon having a qualitative experience of a certain kind, which seems to be indicated to us through behavioral analysis, which is why we construct certain examinations of the brain in the first place, which is why I attribute certain parts of the brain and certain qualities to parts of the brain in the first place. But then when it gets down to that behavioral analysis, like prior to a certain point of fetal development, you start saying that the behavior is simply reactive or like non, like, even when it's not a pure reaction in the same way like a knee-jerk reaction, you'd still say that that behavior doesn't indicate
Sure. Well,
at
how
least
about, okay,
the
rather than the Socratic Inquisition, why not just tell me what is
sorry.
your because I see zero value in any of this inquiry. So I'm curious, what is your like final point, or what do you want to wind up at for this?
Well, I guess I just want to know why, like, well, one, I think there's a point of why you were attributing a conscientious a difference in consciousness to an animal and a human, to the point in which it is like one is of such a radical different kind, like a radically
Sure.
different
The
kind.
behaviors and the cognitive processes of humans seem to be of another kind, substantially different. The metacognitive processes of humans seem to be of a substantially different kind versus like a dog or a cat. Like the ability to reflect on oneself, the ability to employ language that's a proxy for sophisticated concepts in the mind of time and space and everything, like seem to be unique to humans versus animals.
Right, and you're saying that none of that, and specifically none of that is there, like the specific human consciousness is there prior to 20 weeks. Even so, like, the difference between animals and humans is analyzed through behavioral proxies, which give an indication of what we would probably call like phenomenal or existential differences between subjects. So like a human is having like an experience of like existential dread, where a dog is sort of maybe feels a bit anxious, and you'd say that they are two different kinds of things.
Sure, yeah.
Right, okay. And the reason that one is valuable and one isn't is why?
Where I have no idea. One is human, one isn't. I don't know where value ultimately comes from. I don't know.
Right. So but I'm just wondering, like, if we're just saying like one is human and one isn't, right? Why would it matter if, like, let's say the dog did have existential dread? Why would it matter to you?
I don't know, because there's probably going to end up being some metacognitive process that allows us to. I don't know. I'd have to think about it a lot. I'm not sure. They don't, so I don't think about it.
That's the thing. It's just because it seems like, really, it's kind of like when Trent basically pulled you up and he said, look, I think that the human side of things is basically so you don't have to give consideration of animals. And I think the consciousness side of things is so you don't have to give a consideration of zygotes and fetuses before a certain point of development. And all of this seems to be essentially arbitrary. Because, I mean, like, let's be honest, you are a subjectivist, right? So, and it's coming from, like, your descriptions of your behaviors. So, like, why, rather than look towards all of this sort of externality, why don't you just say, like, inwardly, I just feel different? Because that's what it boils down to, right?
Sure. I mean, ultimately, I think it's kind of where we're all at, but sure.
Yeah, I mean, let's say you're right, and let's say we're all at. Then why in the abortion debate, why do we have to relate it to the point in which there is, like, why couldn't you be saying, yes, it's conscious, but it's not having a certain kind of consciousness? And then why would you not be okay, like, in theory, right? Because let's be honest, right? Like, in theory, I think if I was to show you conclusively that humans up to the age of 3 do not have the kind of consciousness you're talking about, which probably isn't true, but let's just say it is. You would still not give a fuck. You still probably would not be okay with killing a 3-year-old. Like,
I mean, theoretically, probably, right? That's the Singer position, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah, it's Singer's position. Yeah, well, I think he's old one. I don't think he's new one. Like, let's say you probably wouldn't be okay with that, regardless, right? So
Well, I
the
don't know
whole
why not. I
point
mean,
is
if somebody could truly prove that babies are just like fucking black boxes of like input, output, stimulus behavior, or whatever, and they're not having any kind of experience at all. I mean, obviously from a political or optics point of view, it would look different. But I mean, like, I guess it'd be at that point the same as terminating a fetus, sure.
right. So you actually do see, right? That's the thing, because it seemed to me like it might just be that you feel differently about these things, not that you actually are considering this kind of conscious, like, is this kind of conscious experience having like an emotional impact on you where you go, hey, wait a minute, that's too much like me, I'm having an empathetic response.
Well, I mean, fundamentally, I would imagine respect for humans or any other life is coming from some sort of empathetic response to protect something that's like me or something that's having an experience like me. Carnivore extends that to humans. Vegan extends that to all sentient things, right?
Yeah, I think I mean, I would say that you could have it off pure reason, right? Like you can. Like I think that there's arguments to be had, but I think for the sake of what, or rather than getting into the meta ethics of it, because that'll just be an absolute mess. I just really want to know where you're attributing value, and what is essentially marking that distinction. Because like likewise, if we invert that, then if I could argue, like for example, that there is no reason to attribute a basic um like input output experience to dogs, cats, dolphins, chimpanzees, whatever, and instead we have just as much reason to believe that they have belief states, pattern recognition, like or recognition of behaviors. They're capable of discerning aspects of their environment and changing their behaviors in the same way that human infants would. I'm just wondering, what would that still carry over? Would you still go, oh, wait a minute, okay, that level of sophisticated consciousness now in an animal would mean that I would be vegan?
Potentially, sure.
Right, okay. So let's just talk about, well, why would you say that the dog, cat, chicken, pig, whatever, specifically, uh, doesn't have this level of consciousness?
They don't exceed, or they don't seem to have any of the proxies that I would use to measure for it. Like unable to employ language. They don't seem to be self-reflective. Like there's just no way for me to see that type of conscious experience that they're having.
So you're saying, like, in terms of the consciousness experience they're having, there's no way for you to perceive it, right? How would you perceive the conscious experience of an adult or a human, like an adult human?
Well, I mean, I would assume if we have all the same brain structures, that their experience is probably identical to mine.
Right. I mean, one, why, and then two.
Well, why is because I would imagine the same emergent thing would come from the same underlying structures.
But I mean, like, why would you even like? It's kind of like question begging, right? It's like this kind of brain is what produces consciousness, and only this kind of brain. Like it's like, and then if I ask why, you go because this kind of brain produces consciousness, and you go why because I assume that it does.
Well, I'm a big question beggar.
You can see why I would have. I'm not. I'm just saying. Like, it just seems that like you are doing what Trent said. I think Trent really did get you right, to be honest.
Okay.
It's just
Maybe
that you are
did,
saying
possibly.
that there is.
Yes, true. I agree.
Well, I don't know what to say, man.
I mean, this is literally why I say that we just value humans, because I don't think that we can explain why we value human consciousness or anything else like that, except for that it's just human and we're social animals, so we value other humans. At least the ones around us. We don't value all humans, but the ones
What
that
do
we
you mean
do
by that,
value, we
Tom?
want everybody else to value them. Huh?
What kind of humans don't you value, Tom?
I don't value any of the ones that I don't know.
Yikes.
But I value my family and my friends, and I want everybody else to value them and the government to value them and give them rights so that they can continue to exist. I'm a little confused, though, perspective philosophy. You're saying that you're not an epiphenomenalist, but it sounds like you're making an epiphenomenal argument where it's like intelligence, consciousness, memory determined by qualia. But if that's not what you believe, what do you believe then?
I'm actually a Catholic.
So you believe in a
so
soul?
I believe in a soul. Yeah, I mean, I'm an Aristotelian, so I'd say that the unifying principle of a human being, or sentient being, a sentient creature, is they're having a psyche. So like your psychological experience is part of what it means to essentially have a unified experience of your environment. Like for example, I don't see a reason to distinguish between a human consciousness and an animal consciousness in terms of basic awareness, like qualia, like Destiny said. I don't see a reason why we would do that. We might have different ways of engaging with the environment, like Thomas Nagel's point. Like I don't know what it's like to be a bat, but that doesn't mean that I don't think that the bat doesn't have a conscious experience that's analogous to the conscious experience of a dolphin, a chicken, a pig, a human. It's just a different kind of the same thing, mediated through different sort of senses and different like organs, which essentially give it different information about the same thing. It's aware of information. That's basically what consciousness is.
Why? How do you get around being Catholic and God making animals taste good?
Because he also allows us to be tempted and tells us that we shouldn't be bad boys.
So every single animal in the animal kingdom that God's created eats other animals except for humans?
Yeah, I mean, we're the only ones, like, the whole point of the Christian narrative is to say that there is a big distinction between animals and humans, and that's rational.
Yeah, but why do
That's
animals
like,
line up like in such a perfectly healthy way with like the human diet?
how do that? Like, they definitely do not. What do you
They
mean?
absolutely do. The nutritional profiles you get from consuming meat is like vastly superior to, you have to do like a pretty complicated dance of vegan diets and supplementation and shit to get the same type of nutrition that you would from just eating meat.
Not really. Like, not really. Like, I think, like, in terms of a vegan diet, the only things that you'd have to supplement in the contemporary era really is B12 and vitamin D. Vitamin D you'd normally get from the sun. B12, the sources of B12 are dependent upon like how we think that we might have got them from water supplies, dirt, essentially like the way in which you get B12 is like a microorganism in the first place. It just so happens to essentially collect in the gut of a ruminant. So it's not like, and even then, like when you're looking at where we would be getting our sources of B12 prior to this, like I don't think it's fair to say that a vegan diet couldn't be just as healthy. And also, we don't seem to have the
Vegan
like,
diets,
look at it, man.
vegan
Like,
diets can be as healthy, but it's substantially more complicated to try to like get the same sorts of like, for instance, essential amino acids. You've got to mix a ton of different types of food to match that, or like you just said, B12 supplementation.
you
Like
could just eat walnuts.
you can't just eat walnuts. What do you mean you can just eat walnuts?
Sorry, and omega 3s and 6s. Sorry, not amino acids.
Yeah.
Amino acids isn't hard at all, actually. I mean, like amino acid profiles, you can eat like I'm not one for whole protein kind of bollocks anyway, because I think it's basically a myth. But even if you did, you can eat beans and rice will give you a 1.1 amino acid profile, so it exceeds beef.
That's
so like
absolutely
like,
not true. But
black beans and brown rice will exceed beef in terms of amino acid distribution.
why was Jesus feeding people with fish if you're not supposed to eat them?
I think one, there is the ethics of 2,000 years ago, and I think Jesus now would be vegan. And two, I would say that there is there's loads of stuff. I mean, there's like depending on how you understand what was going on in the Bible. But like Jesus never said anything about slavery. Yet most Christians would say slavery was wrong, wouldn't we? Because the ethics that he teaches indicates that this behavior was wrong.
Well, hold on.
Whether
Firstly,
it was right
weren't there literally?
2,000 years
I'm pretty
ago.
sure, like in Deuteronomy and stuff, there are guidelines to owning slaves, are there not? So the Bible does mention it.
Yeah,
I don't
I mean,
believe
there
the
is-
Bible mentions anything ever at all about veganism, does it?
Well, there's the covenant. There's the God's covenant with the animals. There's our stewardship.
You gotta have
Um,
kosher food.
Yeah, and like
And
the
also,
fact that
when
all
Jesus fed
plants
people
are
with
halal.
fish, why wouldn't he
Even-
just create black beans and rice? Like the fish weren't. He started with 4 fish and he ended with 1,000 or whatever, right? Why wouldn't he
Someone
just create-
handed it. One thing is that someone handed him the fish. Like it's not like.
Sure, but why not
even
turn
if
it
Jesus
into-
went and caught the fish, even if Jesus went and caught the fish, there is two things to be said, right? One, he's God, right? The whole point, like I hate to evoke divine command theory, but if God comes down and manifests nature, right? Nature and the whole point for Christians is to be for the good of God. So the fact that like Jesus has made nature for himself and for the for the good of God, right? For the good of the Trinity, if you could say, it means that like essentially like if it was for the good in that situation, it was for the good. Like if it was what God wanted, it is the good. Like tautologically for Christians. Like even if like for example like I can command someone to go and murder their son, it will be wrong. If God commands someone to go and murder their son, that is a story we teach our children. Like, it's not the same thing.
Okay, I feel like I don't know how. Yeah, I guess. I mean, if you're religious, you're already doing like tremendous leaps of faith, I guess, to make that worldview work. But the fact that then
I don't
you would
think
take, well, I mean, you are. But then the fact that you would take like the fact that the Bible has zero mention whatsoever of any sort of vegetarian, vegan, anything, and you're trying to read through this that you can still be a vegan or vegetarian while being Catholic, is a fun.
What are you talking about? The Catholic Catechism says that we should not cause needless suffering or, to animals, and that we should needless suffering or death to animals, and that the use of animals is basically tied to the human good. And the human good, like let's look at even scripture on this. Noah's being given animals to eat in the first place was the human need because the world had been flooded. There wasn't anything else to eat. And even how you interpret that, it might be even more limited. That only certain things like eggs and stuff were actually meant to be consumed at that point. But it depends upon translation. So like the way in which scripture works in towards animals, like animals have been made with a manifest end goal, which we could see through a consideration of natural law. They have a telos, and God said that is good, and he gave us the role to consider that good in our day-to-day lives. So like, don't pollute rivers, don't fucking destroy the rainforest and the ocean and that. It's only the only reason that we're in this situation is because essentially like the Protestant reformers, many interpret it very harshly in the first place with the cultural mandate, but it sort of got polluted over time. It got like diluted over time, where like it's just do what the fuck you want in nature for human good.
Why would the Pope not just come out and make a statement on this, and then clear it all up?
Well, I mean, like I don't think I'm not saying that I'm the standard doctrine in terms of Catholicism. I'd say I'm heterodoxical. I'm not the norm. I don't think the average Catholic is going to affirm.
Hold on, wait. I might be a total idiot. Can you be a heterodox Catholic?
Yeah.
What does that mean? So, like, do you not believe that when the Pope is making statements on matters of biblical scholarship or matters of, like, divine command or whatever, that the Pope is not infallible, or?
Well, it's not to say that there's how we understand the infallibility of the Pope, but also there's basically what makes you a Catholic is your affirmation is like 4 pillars of Catholicism. There's like the creed, there's the Our Father, there's the I'm trying to remember them off the top of my head now. There's the creed, there's the Our Father, fake Catholic. Oh shit, that's just like totally evading us. Creed, the Our Father.
Faith, sacraments, life in Christ, and prayer.
Yeah, sacraments, and yeah, basically. And as long as you affirm all of those in the same way, that would be like for example, you affirm like the Catholic Trinity, the Apostolic Creed, you affirm the sacraments, and you affirm these sort of basic structures, then you're a Catholic. And then there's a wide variety. There's huge amounts of debate within the Catholic Church. I mean, it's a huge religion. There was remember, like there's the Scholastics were like some of the largest like debate bros in the fucking world ever. Like there's like whole manuals on how to debate. So like we can't have our own ideas.
So you do believe in like evolution, though, right?
Yeah, 100% believe in evolution. Yeah, I'm not a fucking idiot. Yeah.
Do you deny that like we?
Wait, what is? Hold on,
are
wait.
Like made to eat meat.
Yeah, wait. What is this?
Evolution?
Genesis 9:3. Okay, I'm just reading Bible verses now. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. Every moving thing. Yeah.
That's the story of Noah, which I brought up before, which was essentially contextual to the specific point in which he was.
Why would he give him animals to eat? That's unethical. Can't God just make more vegetables?
God, like I think, like when we're talking about, you could basically say this with the problem of evil in general. Like, why doesn't God just solve all of the fucking problems in the world? Like, there are certain things which are morally acceptable in certain circumstances, which God has outlined, and then there are things which are not. And remember, like, I'm a Catholic. I think
is there any other example where God has like put forth, just like told somebody to go commit sin?
Well, yeah. I mean, he said, like, for example, we would normally outline that you shouldn't go to war. God has commanded war.
Wait, but aren't those wars righteously justified? Are you talking about like the Israelites and shit, or where like which?
Yeah, but in the same way that the killing of animals, right, in this situation is righteously justified.
Well, how is it
That's
justified when God could
basically-
just provide you with vegetables? Like that's different in war.
Well, why is it justified when God could have just not made those people? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
because my understanding is that sin on the planet comes from humans turning their back on God, essentially. That you ate the apple, you got the knowledge, and now humans make choices on the planet where they turn their back from God, and that's where the sin cometh from. But that's different than God just giving you something and saying, go sin. There's a difference between like one man raping a woman and God giving you a Playboy magazine. If God gives you a Playboy, and I would say, well, why would God give you a Playboy? Isn't masturbation sinful? And then for you to say, well, don't men rape women? Like that's sinful too, right? Well, that's different. In one, you've got two humans making poor decisions, which is where evil comes from. But then in the other, the source of the evil is God itself. That doesn't make any sense to me from a Catholic point of view.
but I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in one instance it's a sin, in one instance it's not, and that's based on contexts which God has outlined, which is.
But you haven't given me
you
haven't given me the context of why God wouldn't just give him corn.
Well, it's like the same reason why God just doesn't intervene divinely and give the Jews Israel. Like
Wait, no. Hold on. You're playing a trick here. I don't know where you're doing this. I'm not giving you a circumstance where God has to intervene against other humans. There's just a one-on-one relationship between God and Moses. Why wouldn't God give Moses corn? I'm not talking about like why God wouldn't stop some other humans or help in a war or do human versus human conflict. This is just a one-on-one between God and Moses. Why wouldn't he just give him corn?
But what I don't understand is if we're talking about essentially what is a supernatural intervention, right? Like God can intervene and do whatever the fuck he wants, right? That's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
He can manifest nature in any way, shape, or form that would as to conform with his will. Then the whole point is that there must be a reason he's not intervening here. Now, I'm saying that he's not intervening for the same reason, which is human free will. Essentially.
Hold on, no, wait. You're obfuscating so much. No, this isn't about human free will or intervention. God could have given Moses corn, right? Why would he just not give Moses corn? This isn't about like Moses surviving in the wilderness or whatever. This is just things that God could give Moses. Why couldn't he just give him a ton of vegetables?
I think, I hope you understand that I don't think this is literal. Like, I'm not a fundamentalist. I don't think the Bible is literal. I think this is allegory.
Okay, well, hold on. If it's allegorical, that hurts your argument even more, because in an allegory, would it not make more sense for God to give him vegetables to show the goodness in eating from the lands and having a kind dominion over animals? God provided Moses with two of every animal so that mankind got a peaceful dominion over animal and then gave him vegetable to eat from?
Not at all, because if you look at the structure of the story, Eden is essentially a bloodlust domain in which animals only ate from humans only ate from trees. And then after that, sin enters the world. God has to divinely intervene in order to crush out sin. And humans are left on a boat with only animals to eat and can eat animals only in that circumstance. So what it shows is essentially humans have a responsibility to themselves that doesn't apply to animals, but humans also have a responsibility to animals in general. So it's not like you can eat animals in general, I don't care. It's that in this select circumstance, you can eat animals, which shows that human morals are constrained to specific circumstances which are being outlined in the scripture.
Okay, I feel like we're... Okay, this seems really goofy, but all right.
That's fine. I'm happy to...
I mean, it reminds me of like when people make the argument that like the United States is expressly and specifically like a Christian nation, and despite the fact that like our founding fathers, who are all like the main character and wrote a ton and so much, and we've got the Declaration, we got articles, we've got the Constitution, we've got so many things. For some reason, all of them were too stupid to ever write at any specific point. The U.S. is a Christian nation. They never wrote it. I don't know why they wouldn't write that. And I feel similar with the Bible. We've got the whole Bible. We've got all these councils in Nicaea, all these different books and everything. At no point, why doesn't somebody just write, and thou shalt not eat meat? Like, why can't that be Commandment 11 or whatever? Like, it just seems like it would be such an obviously important thing.
The same reason why it took a while for it to affirm that slavery was wrong. Look, like the way that the way in which the Christian faith develops is that it develops. Like, the living tradition moves alongside it. And as we become more rational and we understand what is right and wrong more clearly, we develop in light with that, with the light of reason. Like, it's like, would you rather we be a dumb bunch of monkeys who rely upon only what people said previously?
I mean, the books of the Bible are the books of the Bible. There might be some I mean, we might reinterpret to make it fit our modern day life, but not eating animals is a pretty big thing. If that was supposed to be like in the original patch
So's not
notes.
having slaves. So's not having slaves yet. It wasn't like written. Don't have slaves.
I feel like slavery was something that was explicitly allowed in the Old Testament. Were there guidelines for treating slaves? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, but one of the biggest points is to say that like slavery would be wrong according to most Christians now against Christianity. Like in terms of how we understand Christianity, we'd say that Christian ethics forbids having slaves.
Okay.
And you know, in relation to the America being Christian, kind of. I mean, there was like America, like the whole point is that the founding fathers were liberals, right? Let's be frank. Well, mostly liberals, but they were liberal Christians. They believed that you had to come to Christ through your own reason, and so relied upon the reasoning of everyone. So they couldn't command someone be a Christian for one. The liberal doctrine that they affirmed does rely upon a creator God. You know, we what is it that we take these rights to be self-evident, you know, as given by a creator God. So it's not like as if like your country wasn't essentially the product of a Christian form of development. It was just that that they were rational enough to see that a Christian nationalism is an oxymoron. That it's like you're forcing someone to try and accept God into their hearts, Christ in their hearts, which is actually unchristian. So I would say that, like, you know, your nation was and is a Christian nation in custom, in constitution, but not in terms of command. I think that would be fucking moronic.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
So
but, I mean, yeah.
I mean, I wanted to kind of take this back because I Destiny, I assume you don't actually think that you are begging the question, and that you do still have a reason for why you would value human consciousness, right?
Yeah, I think human consciousness of a kind, but I mean, like, it's at some point, if we go fundamental enough, it's going to be question begging, probably, right? But I mean, I would argue that all things are at some fundamental level.
So,
Sorry.
wouldn't that mean that you are just valuing humans then, though? Like, if that's the case, like you just that we do just happen to value humans.
Sure, but if we get down to some really fundamental level, like, why do you value humans? Why do you value why do you value happiness over suffering? Why do you value long life over short life? Why do you value fulfillment over, like, I mean, at some point it's going to get incredibly arbitrary. Like, I'm not going to have a good reason for any of this. It's just going to be almost like axiomatic. And I'm just going to appeal to, like, the common feelings of, like, every other human, basically.
Like to say it's axiomatic implies a rationality that's not present, right? Like you're saying that it's self-evident, right? Or that it's rational to be presumed. But really, you're saying it's arbitrary, right? You're just saying that it comes from your passions. Like that's all you're saying. Like it's emotional.
Sure.
You just feel a certain way. But I just don't see why you even go into these debates, man. Why are you even going into these debates, telling the people how you feel? Like I feel this way about abortion. Why? Because I like to think of consciousness in this way. Why do you think of it this way? Because I feel this emotion about it. That's all it is. It's prescriptivism. I feel this way. I wish you would too.
Sure, but at the end of the day, I think that, like, the goal is to probably find, like, what is the most consistent set of guidelines by which to live our life, and I don't agree that people that take a pro-life position would adhere to a consistent set of guidelines. I think the set of guidelines that I lay out would be more consistent if they were followed through and through, whereas on his, I think that there were, like, the bullets that I had to bite from my worldview were if babies could be born without brains, but you could later give them a drug that would give them brains, could you rape the baby until it got the drug that grew its brain? That was like the type of hypothetical that I had to bite the bullet on, which I'm fine with. The hypothetical that he had to bite bullets on, where every single miscarriage has to be investigated as a potential homicide, 64 cell clumps need to be kept alive indefinitely in petri dishes. Plan B, would have to be, anytime you take a plan B, that has to, there has to be an accompanying murder investigation. It has to be, it was illegal for all forms of suicide. People in persistent vegetative states need to be kept alive for decades. If somebody has permanent brain damage that keeps them from ever waking up at 20 years old, they've got to be kept alive for 50, 60 years. I think that I feel like the system of prescriptions that I'm making, we're going to be a lot more consistent than the system of prescriptions that he would have.
I
would have been
think you've totally
completely
misrepresented Trent. I think you've totally misrepresented Trent there. Because I think Trent was fair enough to say that he would value, like, all forms of human life, but in terms of investigating every instance of a miscarriage, it's fine for, he even indicated that it depends upon things like resource distribution, reasonable,
No,
like,
that's all. These are
what would be
cop-outs.
reasonable suspicion?
Yeah. These are
Reasonable
all cop-outs. These are all
like,
cop-outs. These are all cop-outs.
how is that a cop-out? Like,
Because
in the
everything
same
you're
way,
saying
like,
applies to every single homicide investigation, obviously.
yes, it does.
But,
Yes,
but,
it does.
but
And in
giving
this
these types of
case-
qualifiers is because he's trying to cop out from the obvious optics of it looking really bad, that if a woman has a miscarriage at 3 weeks, which is obviously like a traumatic and unfortunate thing, that there probably needs to be some, at least some light investigation accompanying that to make sure that she wasn't conducting herself in a way that was causing the miscarriage. But in
but I don't
Trent's
think
world,
you'd have a, like, I think if she'd, I think you'd be fine to say if she rocked up drunk or like on cocaine or something, right? And you had visible reasons to believe, like you had a reasonable suspicion, then an investigation would take place. But what he was saying is that essentially, that in this situation, that it's not reasonable to investigate every single miscarriage because we don't have reason to believe that these women are not just miscarrying, because it is a dangerous time for developing humans, right?
sure, and there are sometimes there's a thing called SID, sudden infant death syndrome, right? Sometimes for reasons that I don't think we've figured out yet, sometimes babies just die. It's incredibly tragic and it happens, but I'm pretty sure you would say that all of those are probably worth some light investigation as well, correct? Or do you think somebody can just bring a dead baby to a hospital and say, "Ooh, SIDS, sorry, LOL"?
I think they probably are either way, though, because you would want some sort of like medical reasoning for why you had the miscarriage, and so just getting the medical reasoning in and of itself is going to decide whether or not there should be a legal investigation as well. Right?
I mean, it depends. Some people miscarry early on. They're not going to the hospital to get like super medical reasons. Unfortunately, I think the majority of miscarriages are due to weird genetic abnormalities that just happen early on during gestation.
Let's be frank as well, miscarriage is way more common than SIDS.
Yes, it is.
Miscarriage is,
which is also a huge problem because it's basically like billions of babies are dying, like, or not even not billions, but like tens of millions of babies are dying.
Yeah, I mean, like in some respects, you could say it's a huge problem. Like a criminal's can more easily cover their tracks, fair enough. But it also means that it would be more of an impeachment upon an individual's rights to perform unnecessary, like essentially to infringe upon their bodily autonomy for the tests and so on. So, like, we would say that the reasonable suspicion cannot be granted in this scenario. And also, like, let's be frank, right? I think that the...
Wait, hold on. Wait. You're just saying so many random things. Reasonable suspicion. Every time you say something like this, I feel like intuitively what you're striking at is you actually don't see the 64 cells as a baby, because none of these other statements would apply if we were talking about probably like an 8-month fetus or an actual born child. They're like, ooh, it's really inconvenient to investigate, or ooh, are we going to assume that they did something bad to the baby? If it was a born child, the answer would be yes, 11 out of 10 times. But because it's a fetus, you're like, oh, really? Like, I feel like you're intuitively hitting at the same point that a pro-choicer does.
Not at all. Like, not at all. What I'm saying, one, I believe in Solomon starts at the point of sentience, right? I'm a sentientist. We've been through this. But two, in relation to Trent's position, which I'm sort of standing here, it's the fact that there is the reasonable suspicion in relation to what is a highly risky, highly probabilistic explanation, is like, it has to be considered. Like, we'll have to consider that, okay, is someone reasonably likely to have deliberately terminated this pregnancy, or in fact going through a highly traumatic event right now? And does this justify us impeaching or imposing or trespassing on their rights to perform an intensive investigation, which is likely going to prove, or at least, 99 times out of 100, going to prove that it is actually just a miscarriage. And that's even if we could prove it in the first place.
So you just wouldn't investigate? You don't think it's worth investigating to see people are murdering babies? Because some people might be uncomfortable with the investigation?
I don't think that's... No, I think that what I've said is that I would be wanting reasonable suspicion, like reasonable suspicion, where it's like, okay, why do we believe this isn't an ordinary miscarriage?
So a woman goes into a hospital and she's like a little bit intoxicated and she's having severe stomach cramps, and then she finds out that she wasn't pregnant and she miscarried. Are we getting like a manslaughter charge here, or?
If she finds out she wasn't pregnant and she miscarried,
find out she was pregnant and she miscarried.
Yeah, if she was unaware that she was pregnant, I don't think that anyone is going to be wanting to charge them.
Why?
Because, like, for the same reason that if you knock someone over in a car on a road because you didn't see them round the corner and you had no way to see them round the corner or no reason to predict that they were going to be there, and you're following all the rules of the road, you're not getting a manslaughter charge.
I'm
Because you've not
almost
done
positive
something
you
that is...
almost are always getting a manslaughter charge because they'll say you were driving too fast for conditions or you didn't have your headlights on or something else, right?
No, I'm saying let's assume you are. Let's just assume you are driving at a reasonable speed. You had your headlights on.
Yep.
But you couldn't see them, right? There was no way you saw them. Like they walked in front of the car. Like whatever. It happens, right? Accidents happen. That's the same thing.
I think it would depend on the exact circumstances. Like I can imagine in some cases where you're correct, but for the woman, like the woman is being negligent because she's had sex, so it's possible that she could be pregnant, right? Like there's a reasonable chance that you could be pregnant if you're having sex.
Yes, I mean, if you were to say like, was the woman on birth control and stuff like that?
Even
as
if you're on
well,
birth control, we're talking about. Remember, this is your position. We're talking about.
It's not my position. This is Trent's position.
This is Trent's position. We're talking about murdering babies or killing babies, right? And in all those involuntary manslaughter charges that you're bringing up, you better believe there's a full investigation every time. You wouldn't be able to just tell the police, "Oh my God, the guy just popped out. I didn't see him," and they wouldn't go, "Oh, okay, that's chill. We're not going to investigate. That's fine." Like there's going to be a full investigation every single time.
I think if we're talking, but the whole point is that if we're talking, like the rates and like, what do you think our infant mortality rate would have to be to match the rate of miscarriages in like, just generally? Like it would.
I've seen anywhere from
is that
15 to 50% of pregnancies miscarry, depending on the numbers.
Yeah,
like sure.
Like there's a huge difference. Like we not only do pragmatically can we afford to put these resources in, but we have a much greater reason to believe that there was essentially foul play, and that's even with SIDS.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm just saying that if you truly believe these are real babies dying, then we need to treat it with the gravity of a real baby dying.
Every crime is serious, but reasonable suspicion is applied in every single case. And I don't think that you're not giving the same gravity.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that like
all deaths aren't investigated.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying that like of all the grand total of all the things happening in the universe right now, a pro-lifer's number one thing shouldn't even be to stop abortions. It should probably be to find ways to combat miscarriages. That should be like the most important thing because that is the greatest loss of life that's happening on the planet right now. It's not genocide, it's not abortion, it's miscarriages. And then I've seen up to 40% of miscarriages could be prevented as well. That people involved in like heavy lifting, some sort of alcoholic consumption, because just things that women do, I think even staying up late was a predictor, things that women do because they just don't know they're pregnant. And the very early stages of pregnancy can be predictive of miscarriages. But that should be like the number one
you can't
health
even
issue.
You can't even detect pregnancy.
There's a really easy way to detect pregnancy, and that's if a dick has been inside of you and is ejaculating. If you know that's happening, then there are probably some
with
precautions.
birth control, like that's the
Sure,
thing. Like,
even with birth control,
it eliminates 99.9%.
99. What if I told you that you were engaged in an accident? There's a 0.1% chance of murdering a child. Do you think you'd just be like blasé about it?
No, but like you're
laughing because it's funny, but I agree it is funny. But it is funny because you don't really consider that fetus to be a baby the same way. Because if this is a baby, then you would be treating it as the gravity situation. But it's funny because like it's a fucking 2-cell petri dish fetus. Of course it's funny, which I agree it is funny, but
I think that it's not even just that. Like, look at it like this. Like, if I was to go and drive a car on the road, there is a certain percentage that I'm going to be in a serious accident, or even just an accident, and I should take all of those accidents seriously. But that wouldn't stop me driving a car because we would say that there's reasonable risk. Now, I'm not one of those people that's going to say that sex should only be for reproduction. I don't think that's the case. Maybe that, Trent or some other Catholic is going to actually affirm that sex only has the purpose of reproduction. I think that it has more than the purpose of reproduction. I think pleasure and specifically love is essentially the overall, the unity of two people in terms of their desires. I think that's a lovely thing. I don't know why we'd want to get rid of that, right? Now, let's take that you've got someone on contraceptive. They're engaging in this action. There's very, very small chance to believe that they're actually going to be impregnated. They don't realize that they're pregnant until after the miscarriage. I think that that we could say that this person did not have any of the prerequisites necessary for committing a crime. Something like the guilty mind, like mens rea, where they intentionally or committing this action that was like
Well,
essentially
hold on.
either,
Mens rea doesn't mean that you intended to harm somebody. The mens rea could just be that you were being reckless, right? Like the mens rea for involuntary manslaughter is not I was trying to kill somebody and it happened lightly, right? It could just be you're engaged in a negligent behavior.
Yes. So are you saying that all like under Trent's view, you're saying that all sex with protection would still be reckless if you want
Taking high
testing
precautions,
or taking precautions.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you're in like you're in like murder baby mode essentially. Yeah. You might kill a child.
Right.
That's a really big deal, I think. I feel like that. I feel like killing children is a really big deal. Yeah.
I mean, I would agree killing children is a really big deal. I just don't know whether they would affirm that this is because it is the percentage, right? It depends on it depends on what protection you're using. Like if you're using the pull-out method, then yeah, I think most people are going to say lock them the fuck up. You know, your pull-out game was too weak, you're going to jail. But I think the alternative is also that they were using like a highly effective form of contraception, let's say even multiple forms of contraception, and yet there is this freak accident. But the problem is that that's also in terms of miscarriages. There's no way to know whether this was an absolute freak accident in relation to two people taking every precaution necessary to engage in what is a loving act and a good act to engage in for a couple to enjoy versus they're being blasé and not giving a fuck about, infants. And there's just no way, and that's not including the fact that there is also the people who do know they're pregnant and yet maybe take the risks. And then there's the people who do know they're pregnant and also, just have a tragic accident. Like that's the problem with this whole scenario is that there's just so fucking many that it's just like this, the pragmatics of it don't work out. And even the reasonable suspicion is going to be, you're going to have some sort of tangible, like, you've done something fucking dodgy for me to be willing to investigate. It's like, look, when an old person dies, we don't make sure that they weren't smothered every fucking time, right? Or like someone didn't slip them a pill. Because
I understand everything you're saying. It's just none of this matters. But I know there's a lot of talking about. But like we're talking about killing children, and you're trying to give me this whole thing of like, well, it wouldn't be pragmatic to research it. It wouldn't be like I don't know if we've got the research. Like you're giving me all these things. Not a single one of these things would apply. The whole country was looking for Elizabeth Smart. We've got Amber Alerts on our phone to try to alert every single person in an area if a child has been abducted. People go above and beyond when it comes to helping and saving children. But that intuition is completely absent when it comes to the largest genocide of children in the world, which are miscarriages. It's not even there for an inkling of it. You don't even have the slightest feeling of like, maybe we should actually dramatically restructure the way society works to alleviate this problem. You don't even have you're just like, fuck it. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell if you kill a baby or not. Like, do you really give a fuck? Your entire argument summed up is like, it's kind of hard to tell if you kill a baby, and it's like, god damn, that's so many reasons. Like, fuck it. That's your entire argument, and you can say it in more words than that, which you're gonna do.
Why don't we do this for old people? Like, why? Like loads. Like, old people are dying all over the fucking place, right? And it's a natural thing. Like in the same way as a miscarriage is a natural thing.
We do.
Right?
We do an extraordinary amount. Look at how many homeless people can go into an emergency room over and over and over again and rack up bills that are 6-7 figures large sometimes. We do an extraordinary amount of care. It might not seem like it, but yeah, we have an extraordinary amount of care available for people in the United States that are funded by the federal government. But we'll have an extraordinary amount of
I mean, like whether the United States does enough, I think is very questionable. Let's take the case of like old people dying, old people's homes, hospitals, hospices, wherever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all of those, like you. I mean, let's be frank. Every 1 in 5 old people could be getting like murked and we would have very little way to know whether that was the case, but we don't have any reasonable suspicion, right? Like in the same way, like have the hospital staff been attentive enough? Have they been given their medications on time? Have they been fed an adequate diet? Have they been laid down flat?
I don't understand what you're saying. This happens all the time, where there are old people's homes where they might mistreat patients. I'm pretty sure my grandma got a settlement because her tailbone got broken at the hospice or the whole person's homes that she was at when they were mistreating her. These types of investigations, people care about this and investigate this type of stuff all the time.
but they only investigate when there's a reasonable suspicion. We don't investigate every death of every person at an old people's home, at a hospital or anything like that, do we?
No,
Like,
but that's
even though we
usually
would all consider it incredibly serious by your own standard.
Yeah, but that's
we
because the
consider it
cause of
incredibly
death.
serious.
Once people are at that stage in life, the cause of death is usually like they're at
and
this
at the same stage, inverted, a miscarriage is the most likely cause of death. And so
Okay.
it's the same reasoning.
Then let's say that is the same reasoning. Then why do you care about an abortion at like 6 weeks, 8 weeks? It was most likely to die anyway. Is an abortion actually bad at this point then?
There's a very big difference between it happening because of a natural cause and me causing it to happen. Like Hurricane Katrina annihilating New Orleans, tragic. Wish it didn't happen. Maybe we could have done something about it. Not I'm gonna drop a nuke and just fucking flood New Orleans. Like there's a big fucking difference there.
I don't know if there is. If you're telling me that like you'd assume that it's gonna die anyway. Because that seems like what you're saying for like a fetus. The assumption is you're probably going to miscarry, probably
You
going
just
to die.
want to nuke Florida. You're just wanting to nuke Florida. I can see it. I can feel it in your voice. Like it's like, come on, man. Of course, there's a big difference there. It's not that it's going to die anyway.
If there's such an assumption of a fetus that there's a decent chance of miscarrying anyway, who cares if someone has an abortion?
There's a decent chance that there's going to be a Category 4 or 5 hurricane hit Florida at some point. It doesn't mean that we should be trying to hurry the process along.
Correct, but on the contrary, what happens when those hurricanes happen? People take every single precaution. We don't just say, nobody would say, Cat 4 hurricane? Some people are probably going to die, good luck. No, FEMA comes in, people evacuate cities, people get food in advance, people do everything they can to preserve life.
100%. You go to an emergency room, you
but
say,
in your,
I think I'm having
in your
a miscarriage,
world, but in
I
your
need
world,
progesterone.
No, in your world, a Cat 4 hurricane comes by and you're like, half are probably going to die anyway, good luck. Keep working.
I think I don't think that this makes sense, right? Because I think that, look, we're saying that these are highly risky scenarios, right? And we'll not investigate every single scenario. That doesn't translate to fuck it, kill them anyway. I don't see how that I don't see how that follows.
Because it sounds to me like you're basically, if you're at a point where you expect most of them to die, and if it does die, most of the time we're not even going to investigate because they're probably going to die anyway, then you've essentially fabricated the right of like, I mean, if people want to kill it that early, like, who cares? Most of them are going to die anyway. We're not going to bother investigating most of it. Like, why not? It feels like that's essentially the world that you've constructed.
Well, that's the same thing as old people. Like, if fuck it, if we're not going to kill them at that point anyway, like, who's going to, like, no, but like, if we have reasonable suspicion, we're going to investigate because it's wrong. It's just that, unfortunately, nature's a bit of a bitch at times.
We don't treat old people that way, though. I don't know why you keep saying that. We do everything we can to preserve the life of those older people. Cause of death is generally known. If an old person goes into an old person's house and they die in 3 days, nobody's just saying like, old person, they died. There'd probably be an investigation there.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, like, if you mean like if there was like there'll only be an investigation if there wasn't reason to believe they died of a natural cause in a natural way. Like that's why we would say the circumstances are not suspicious, and then there's no investigation, right? Like,
yeah, but there's probably some sort of like post-mortem done or something generally.
I don't think so. Like, I think there's a cause of death that's attributed, but like, I don't think that given like full autopsies
not
to
like
every
a
old
full
person.
autopsy, but you'll know. Like if somebody has Alzheimer's disease and develops like pneumonia and starts dying from complications of that, you're not going to cut into them. But like the whole like thing is kind of laid out.
Yeah. So if someone has so if there's a miscarriage and it's a really high likelihood, in the same way that there were like a 70 or 8, well, like an 89-year-old gets pneumonia or she's been coughing for 3 days and then falls down dead. It's like, yeah, she could have, like, it's very possible someone came in with a fucking pillow and
yeah, but if somebody
her.
falls down dead in a house, you would investigate that. Same way if somebody comes in with a miscarriage, you should probably also investigate that as well, I think. I'm just saying, if we're truly killing babies here, it feels like it's worth looking into, but
I think it's. I would just apply the same reasoning to the elderly, like, man. I think there could be. I think there's a genocide going on right now. They're killing all of the geriatrics.
Yeah, maybe you just don't have any experience with this, but people absolutely care about this, and people absolutely do look into this. There's a reason why, especially for like Hispanic communities, it's probably true for white people too, but like putting your mom in like a home is like one of the most disgusting, disrespectful, and rude things that you can do as a child. At least in Cuban communities, bro, my family, holy shit, when it came to, that's why my mom left me when I was 16 to move to fucking Florida to take care of her mom. The idea of putting older family in homes, this is a thing that everybody talks about. I don't know if you think that like most people just send their.
I think you're right.
Yeah, so I don't know what you come to this thing like, oh, like, well, when we start taking older people dying seriously, like, people do take older people dying seriously. It's a really serious thing. It's not blasé at all.
I agree, but from this standard, do you think that, like, from your standard, which is essentially, like, if we were to consider this a human, like, in terms of the miscarriage, we should be doing a full investigation simply because this is a negative scenario? Why wouldn't we do that with old people? Like, in every time an old person dies, full autopsy.
Because you have
the
no,
fucking
you're not. You can obfuscate as much as you want. I know it's funny to obfuscate, but you're only obfuscating. We don't do it with old people because they're already in a medical environment where they've got a medical history, and the cause of death is more often than not known. If you want to make this an accurate comparison, stop comparing it to old people in homes. Compare it to an old person dying at their house and then police being called or 911 coming and finding a body, because that's what a miscarriage is. Miscarriages don't often happen where you're in a hospital in a monitored environment, doctors keep it happening, and then you have a miscarriage, right? If you want to talk about like a miscarriage in a hospital, that's a more equivalent comparison here. But right now we're talking about a dead baby is brought from a house to a hospital, and every time there's going to be an investigation. That's what a miscarriage is to you. If you're there in the pro-life or to Trent, a dead baby is brought from a house to a hospital.
Okay,
just
like,
real quick, I looked this up. From what I can tell, 25 million babies die from miscarriages each year. 73 million are aborted each year. So there seems to be a pretty big discrepancy between.
Hold up. Wait. 73 million
I would
babies
be
are aborted every year?
I'd be very surprised. I'd be very surprised if that's the case.
That's like every woman of birthing age getting pregnant and aborting every single year in the United States.
Yeah, so this is roughly 121 million unintended pregnancies occurred each year between 2015 and 2019. Of these unintended pregnancies, 61 ended in abortion. This translates to 73 million abortions per year.
Wait, half of women in the Is this worldwide, or is this in the United States?
Yes, this is worldwide.
Oh, okay.
All right, okay. Right.
This is worldwide. I'm having trouble finding just the U.S. numbers right now.
Okay, yeah, right. That does make a lot more sense. Okay, but then, I mean, the miscarriages should be way higher than that.
But
I mean,
the
especially
reality is
in
most people probably don't even know when they miscarry, or a lot.
Yeah, or even wouldn't even have the means to do anything about it when they did. Like the most of the world is like, was it like a third of the world lives under $1 like a day, like no access to real medical treatment. So like the miscarry, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't find just the U.S. numbers right now, but that is like, yeah, worldwide there seems to be a huge difference between miscarriages and abortions, and
like, I think it'd be fair to
from
say,
what I understand, the first world countries are the ones having the most abortions. I doubt they're having the most miscarriages. So the stat
every abortion is going to
brought up,
every abortion is going to be recorded, but probably half of miscarriages will be reported, because for some women, like, you can just have a really, really shitty period after like getting pregnant and you're not even aware that you're miscarrying. Like, that can happen. That's a possibility.
I'm not even contesting that. It's more so that it's obvious that there's way more miscarriages than there are abortions, when it seems like worldwide there's 3 times the amount of abortions than there are miscarriages that we have on record. So even if we double, triple that, there's still going to be about the same amount.
Right. I mean, like, I think to be fair, like the number of abortions, like, that's like, you know, I think that, like, from Trent's case, I think that is like obviously a major issue, and I think that there's a distinction in kind from the miscarriage anyway, where the abortion is intentional, the miscarriage is accidental. So I mean, like, it is fair to even say, like, obviously there's one thing, like, not investigating what might be, like, even if you were to say that this is police negligence to, like, or like, you know, it's something that we would want to do but it's not pragmatic. There's a difference in obviously in saying that means that we can just do it. But I mean, like, to be fair, like, I guess the reason I'm even invested in this is, like, I think that in your case, like with the child sex doll thing, right, like do you not, like, so you so that indicates to me that it is about consciousness to you. Like, there is something about human consciousness that you give a fuck about, that if you are basically, you get like a child looking 19, like, it's got the brain of a 19-week, like, basically, let's say, like, the sort of, it has behaviors but not any real, like, unified cortex, you're willing to say like it can be used as like a sex doll, right? Like if it was just like I don't know, had the body of a 3-year-old but the mind of a 19-week-year-old or something. You were fine with that, right?
Body of a 3-year-old but a mind of a 9-week-old. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, like 19 week or whatever, like
19
before
weeks, yeah, sure.
like yeah. Um so it just why? like surely even extrinsically, man, you would be like, that's just going to propagate a lot of horrible fucking human beings, right? Like
Yeah,
there's
but
going to
that's a
be
totally
people
different
that
thing. My position on animal torture would be the same. That like people that
right,
torture
okay,
animals are more often than not going to be horrible human beings. It's probably a really big predictor
right,
of it.
right. It is. I mean, like, if you look at like the rates of people who kill animals for a living, the psychological damage of people, so people who kill animals for a living, you can track that basically alongside report and arrest rates for violence. So like you double the size
Well,
of a slaughterhouse, you can double the rate, and that's controlling for factors such as ethnicity, sex, religion, poverty, like major contributors to like variables in terms of criminal action and well specifically violent criminal action, right?
I'd be interested in seeing that, but sure.
Yeah, so like if we take that at least, could you say that like it would so if the person like right like just out of curiosity, at what point does it become okay to produce essentially a class of people who are either raping baby sex dolls or murdering people and overall is going to have a very negative psychological like societal effect? I think we could agree,
I don't think we
like
should ever
most
have
likely
people that are murdering, or that
animals rather.
that are raping like non-functional child bodies. I don't think that would ever be good
Right.
for humanity.
Why would you be okay with the animals then? Because I'm assuming it's the same extrinsic
Because there's
reasoning,
like
right?
there's a function for harvesting animals and eating them that I don't
Yeah,
think
but
there's
there's
a
the
good
real
function.
psychological effect of what people turn into when they commit these jobs.
I would have to. I don't think I believe that's a real thing. I'd have to read about that.
Right.
I don't know
Okay.
if like
So you just
factory farmers or people that like harvest animals are like predisposed towards committing violence. I've never heard that before. It's
you even
possible.
have farmers. Farmers even have diminished like empathy studies on farmers show diminished empathy. But like in terms of slaughterhouses, it's much more profound. And we haven't even obviously this is all based on the human effect. If it's all extrinsic, zoological diseases, like do you not even care about any of that? The fact that the risk of COVID would basically be negligible if people stopped eating meat, or the
The
effects
risk
on the
of
climate,
COVID would be
effects on
negligible.
like COVID-like disease, like a zoonotic disease. So like whether it's SARS, or another kind of SARS, or whether it's
I don't know if is the
uh,
only way for animal to human transmission through consumption of.
well, it's just through direct contact, and the real purpose of direct contact is by breeding billions of animals, coming into contact with them daily, and then killing and eating them. So like
I
if you
thought
think
one of the
like
largest
slaughterhouses,
reservoirs for zoonotic to human transfer of diseases was like bats, and it's not because we eat them. I thought it's because we contact them, but they're like a big reservoir of. But I mean, like you can make
bats like I don't think I think bats are more likely to you're more likely to contract certain diseases from bats, but one number one source of diseases is actually pigs because of the biological similarity. So like if you look towards things like swine flu, the reason that we like give such a fuck about swine flu is because we are so like pigs that when a pig gets a disease, it can pass well pretty much any form of flu, it can pass straight to a human. So it can basically like swine flu is a massive threat to humanity. Yet we will and one of the reasons that even like we worry about bats is because bats come into contact with the pigs more often than humans come into contact with bats, and they can pass it to pigs, and then as soon as it evolves to pigs, we get murked by the there was a film actually that did like on this. It was like called like Pandemic or whatever, where like it was like a new kind of SARS. It was before COVID. A new kind of SARS develops because a bat bites a pig or some shit, and then the people like a chef doesn't wash his hands after touching a dead pig, shakes someone's hand, and it starts a global pandemic. Like if we look at like what's like the actual like risk here, it's like it's not even small. Like swine flu, bird flu, tuberculosis, like pretty much all of our major diseases are linked to creating huge artificial populations of animals in confined and filthy environments, only to
Yeah, I
then
mean, that would be
basically.
something you'd have to weigh, I guess. And do you think that eating meat is worth the diseases? But I mean, there's a lot of zoonotic, like West Nile. Didn't that come from? Wasn't that a mosquito? I'm pretty sure there are a lot of pandemics and stuff that have started that haven't come. Now, I'm sure that, like, I mean, eating pigs and animal harvesting and everything probably also breeds a whole bunch of bacteria and shit, which is that's why we killed all the Native Americans, I think, when we came to the United States, right? Because there were so many more viruses that were endemic to European peoples. So, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, that would have to be
Smallpox
it.
being one of the bigger ones there. Like, yeah, like smallpox was, I think it was, I don't know if it was goats or something, but yeah, but like essentially, like, it's
Oh,
that. And I'm just
malaria is
wondering, like,
another
if
one,
the
yeah.
risk, yeah, I'm just wondering why, like, right, if we're looking at it like purely, because if this is purely extrinsic, right, in the sense that the only reason you're against people having child sex doll things is because of the behavioral consequences, right? I'm assuming it's that.
Mm-hmm.
Then why would like and the consequences to the broader society? Why wouldn't we say the same thing about something like zoonotic diseases?
I mean, you could. It would just depend on how bad the zoonotic diseases
I
get.
mean, for you, I mean, like, why
Because I don't
wouldn't
think I've
you be
been. I
like,
don't
oh,
think I'm
that's
so threatened by zoonotic diseases that I would mandate the entire world should be moving off of meat.
really? Like, so you think that like
I don't know if they're
the
that
the
much of an
threat of
existential threat to mankind. I don't. I don't think
really
that is the
like
case.
even after COVID, even after the massive lockdowns, the millions of people dying, the like the fucking the way that certain diseases have had like COVID was now right really like I want to point out COVID was absolutely fucking nothing for zoonotic diseases. There's diseases that have like Ebola has a death rate of up to 50%.
Yeah, but I don't think
Like
Ebola is as big a deal because people die and they are symptomatic of it when they have it like very quickly, right?
but
Like,
that's the thing, you're relying upon it basically locking in the right mutagens, right? Like or like was it antigens or whatever, where like basically if it mutates the right way, it 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 can become like an unbelievable risk really quickly, which is why like so like for example there's forms of swine flu that have basically a that can kill like 20% of the people it comes in contact with, right? But it's just that it hasn't evolved into such a disease yet that it's asymptomatic for like the first 10 days yet still spreads. like that could happen. There's no reason like that couldn't happen
what about
and
like
even
E.
be quite
coli
possible,
developing
like
into something more
plausible.
like lethal or whatever?
What, sorry?
What about like E. coli like changing or mutating into something more? Isn't that like a
Oh yeah, I
vegetable
mean it
born?
happens.
That's like a
No, I
vegetable.
think it's waterborne. It's
What?
water, isn't it? It's like the water. I mean, like obviously, like that, but I mean, we do try to stop that, right? We'll put like chlorine in water and shit like that we'll wash vegetables with chlorine and stuff like that to try and stop this from growing. I think. But like, yeah, I mean, like we should try to mitigate those risks. But this seems like
What
it
if it
seems like
was
a
the case
huge
that
risk.
fruits and vegetables poison more Americans than beef or chicken?
I mean, like, wait a minute. If it was the case,
Yeah.
like it's not, but like, are you saying just hypothetically?
Are you sure it's not?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not. Like, have you ever, like, as everyone went, ooh, you didn't cook that apple, be careful. But versus, like, chicken or pork.
Yeah, but I've eaten
Like,
billions of pounds of chicken, billions of pounds of chicken, but I
yeah, I'm not
haven't.
saying that you're going to
But
die
you
every
just,
time. I'm
well, no,
just
no,
saying the risk of,
the risk is zero if you cook it. Internal temperature of chicken is
there's not a
155.
risk of zero. Like, even if you cook it, like, the risk's not zero. But like, just in terms of, like, the risk of it being improperly prepared, like people not following social protocol, like the overall risks of society, like surely that plays a factor here. You're relying upon people essentially, like convincing people to wear masks during COVID, fairly difficult. Convincing people to wash their hands, as like I've seen all the time, like at my local bakery, people I've seen it at least twice, three times. They've touched like bacon, raw bacon, and then they'll touch something else without washing their hands, like a door or some other part of the like sort of preparation area. That if the now is kind of contaminated, right? If they go and then touch that again and then serve a customer, if there was a disease present, it could spread something. So, like, even
Doesn't
like
this
I
hurt
don't
your
like.
argument from earlier about risk versus utility?
Whose?
perspective philosophies. It seemed like earlier you were making an argument that like we drive cars just because like there's a utility to driving cars, yet there's still a risk to it, right? You were making like a ton of arguments earlier about risk versus utility.
I don't think that I think there's a difference between rational risk and irrational risk. Like it's not that like we would deem something so essential towards our lives. Like it's the question. I mean, what I'm essentially asking Destiny is why is meat so essential to his life and his happiness that he considers it absolutely worth like risking the death of millions of people and catastrophic consequences in ways that is not comparable to driving a car and there being a car accident, like at all. It's not, and also I wouldn't say utility so much, but yeah.
I mean, it seems like access to meat and meat products is a pretty big shortcut for most people around the world. It seems like it's easier for a lot of people to acquire. It seems like there are a lot of like vegetable and fruit-borne illnesses that make people sick as well. I don't know if the risk is as great. I feel like the environmental risk is probably a stronger argument than risk of viruses, but.
Oh, I definitely don't. I think risk of virus is probably the largest. But I mean, yeah, I mean, then there's but that's the thing. It's not even the only one. But these compile, right? So you've got the environmental case. Then you've also got the psychological damage that it may be doing to thousands of workers. You've got the antibiotic resistance and the fact that animals are fed antibiotics and you're being passed them. Like, just purely extrinsically, I'm just wondering, like, if the child sex doll thing is concerning, I don't know why this wouldn't be.
Because the child sex doll has absolutely no positive, like, enjoying a piece of meat is a lot different than enjoying, like, simulated child rape.
Well, I would agree, but I think for different reasons. Like, I would say that is vicious. Like, I would take a virtue ethical response to this, not a consequential one. Is that what you're saying? Is that it's not about the consequences? It's just about the action itself that it's wrong?
No, I'm not saying the action is wrong. I'm just saying it'd be predictive of like I don't think somebody that eats a cheeseburger is necessarily going to go on and become a serial killer, but somebody that's raping child sex dolls is probably...
No, but someone who eats a cheeseburger might be paying into a system which causes the death of millions of people from a zoonotic disease. If we're just talking about consequences, it doesn't matter what their intentions were, right?
I guess I don't know. I would have to see the overall risks and likelihood of transitioning to vegan food supplies and all that. I guess I don't know.
You don't think that it's at least plausible that the risk is greater to society? Then let's say there was like how many pedophiles? Like how
anything
often
is plausible. I don't know. We're on hypothetical after hypothetical after hypothetical. It's plausible that we switch the entire world's food supply over to some vegan thing, and then some big plague wipes out all the crops, and then we die because we don't have animal agriculture anymore. Like there's a lot of things that are plausible.
I mean, if a big plague wiped out all of the crops, we would all die anyway because that's what we feed the animals.
That is not true. Animals don't eat the same food that humans eat.
They eat primarily they eat like primarily like cereals, but they do eat a lot of the same foods like soy, corn. These are largely like animal foods. Like I think it's 70 to 90% of the calories of soy.
Cows are mainly eating grasses, legumes, alfalfa, clover, and hay. How much of this do we eat? We can eat legumes, right? Do we eat the same type as cows? I don't think we can eat alfalfa. I don't think we eat clover or hay. I know you can chew on a piece if you want to be cool, and I don't think we generally eat grass.
I'm not sure
Chewing
how
on
much
hay
of
is
the
cool.
I think that like in terms of the overall calories, I'll have to double check. Like, but I will say like based on the fact that the overall calories that are fed to animals from something like soy, corn, being 70 to 90%, I think indicates primarily that, well, one, we are feeding a lot of food we can't eat to animals.
Oh, it's a difference between
two,
factory farm
we would
cows
struggle,
and sure.
We would struggle to even produce, like, if it's non-factory farm, we're just talking about grass. There is nowhere near enough grassland to feed the world's population. Not even close. Like, not even. It would take an absolutely absurd amount of land to feed the world's population on grass-fed animals. So it's not even worth mentioning. Like, it's either factory farming or it's nothing in terms of the survival, like, existentially of the human race. Like, and that's not even considering the fact that it seems to have existential risks. I don't know. Like, just from your point of view, right? Like, that's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not like go vegan right now. You know, I'm not expecting anything like that. What I'm just saying is that if you're saying that it's purely consequential and that's the way you're analyzing it, I don't know why you wouldn't apply the same risk criterion.
Because all of these risk criteria are incredibly difficult to manage. Like, you telling me that, like, the zoonotic device is going to wipe out mankind, you have no idea if that's true or not. We might go another 5,000 years without a virus similar to COVID. Or the next huge virus that wipes us out might come from vegetation, right? It's impossible to, like, weigh all of these things together. Like, you're like, give me, like, a Drake's equation of, like, the end of humanity based on meat consumption.
It doesn't have to even be the end of humanity. It just has to be a significant amount of deaths, right?
Or not significant, or whatever. You know what I mean. I'm being hyperbolic.
Maybe I know what you mean. No,
but I'm just saying that you're giving me, like, what about this subjective factor compatible with this subjective factor compatible with this subjective factor? Why don't you change the entire world's food source? Like, that's I don't know. I don't know what the measurement is of any of these things. I have no idea.
But if we just look at the risk of pandemics and look, so we've had swine flu, bird flu before COVID, then we had mad cow's disease, foot and mouth. And then that's not including the ones that have actually already spread and actually are causing us problems right now. So, like, the risk is clearly pretty severe because a lot of us already die from these zoonotic diseases.
Where did
the
influenza, Black Death, the plague,
kills a lot of us.
Where did the plague come from?
The plague come from lice or what are they called? Fleas on small mammals, typically rats.
Okay, so then the deadliest virus or the deadliest bacteria of all of humankind didn't even come from factory farming or animals. It came from rats. So I don't know if anything you're saying. So, like, we could stop all the factory farming in the world and switch to vegetation, and we can still get wiped out with the same thing.
The plague's not the deadliest virus. Actually, influenza is far more deadly than the plague. It's just that it doesn't have the same existential sort of connotations. Way more people die from influenza than die from the plague.
Is that just because of how many people exist on the planet today, or?
It's just because, like, the actual likelihood of contracting influenza numerous times in your life is much higher. It's not curable through antibiotics. It's it can be pretty fucking rough. The flu can actually, like, if you've got a diminished immune system, the flu will just take you the fuck out. So the flu is dangerous as fuck. Like, that's why we make such a big deal about vaccinating against it.
Okay, I've got some questions. I don't mean to keep giving you guys whiplash, but earlier we were talking about consciousness and, like, why you value consciousness. Destiny, is there, like, a point within evolution that you think humans gained this consciousness, that you think we started to value this, or do you think, like, all throughout our evolution we just happened to value our own kind?
I'm sure there's probably some, like, what is it, like Cro-Magnon Neanderthal or some shit. There was some bridge or whatever that for some reason doesn't exist anymore. But there was probably some diminished or half state in between us and something else that would have provided, like, a interesting challenge to how we view ourselves in the world. Or if we find aliens that are more developed than us or something, or similarly developed, it would probably challenge our perception of where we exist in the universe.
I'm just wondering why it would be... Sorry, I'll let you continue.
Do you think we would automatically value aliens if they had... like a consciousness, but it was let's say they look like worms. They don't really have eyes. But it's obvious they have, like, a high form of consciousness. Do you think we would automatically value them, or do you think we would still just value humans more than them?
I have no idea. It would probably depend on the level of sophistication and the appearance of the things, would be my guess, and their organization as well. Like, for instance, if we ran into things that function like ants, we probably wouldn't treat them like people because we don't like colonies of things. We'd probably want them to be like one, like, sentient beings contained in one, or I don't know. There's probably a lot of things that would influence that. But
like an individualistic being, you mean?
Sure. Like humans are like self-contained sentient creatures that have other shit. Like an ant colony is, like, different, right?
Yeah. So with consciousness, like, you're saying that it's intuitive at some point or subjective, but it does seem like every time you still kind of come back to it just being about humans. Like, it's just about humans being alive, that's what we value. And did you change on this? I never heard you talk about, like, intuition when talking about moral
a little bit,
like,
but I just
until...
usually don't bounce around these topics because in my opinion it's a total waste of time. Abortion and veganism are usually the two that I just don't dip into much because it's the highest effort to the lowest, like, reward and possible, like, value at ever discussing. So there are other things I usually prefer to talk about.
Can I just ask though, like, because like one, you have been talking about it a lot recently, which is basically, I mean, I've been watching your debates with Vegan Gains, Trent. You were on with those girls, those pro-lifers and stuff. So it's kind of something that you've been doing a lot of, right? Which is why it sort of sparked my interest. Why obviously Tom's doing this panel, or wanted to do the panel, and obviously it didn't sort of actualize in the way that would have been ideal for the environment. But the point is that obviously it's something you've been engaged a lot in, and it's sparked quite a lot of conversation around your position. So if you think that it's all because from what I can tell, to be honest, I'm very unsure as to whether you are valuing a specific kind of consciousness or if it's just an abstract category of human consciousness, and it's just sort of pulling a lot of ethical weight for it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
there's
if you're not
ways to
interested
doing
in
that. The
topic,
reason why I don't dive much into it is because it's just going to be a needless circle jerk of vegan debate servers, and then maybe like pro-life people like trying to like insert their opinion of what is the objectively correct answer and all this, and the real life policy and even moral implications are so unbelievably infinitesimally small that it's like I wouldn't even bother to waste my. There's a million other things I'd rather be talking about, researching, investigating, or arguing than trying to figure out like what is the moment of the beginning of like human life, or what is the measurable material or immaterial difference between animal and human consciousness. There are like so many more interesting things to talk about, in my opinion. I
mean, it's just more of like the fact, like, I mean, that's fair enough. It's just one of the things that it's basically, why have you been doing it if you're so
because I got the first one was he said that he wanted me to go down a debate. I was already doing a bunch of other podcasts and I was fine, and I assumed that we were going to have a conversation about that, and then it was going to pivot into like other things relating to what that podcast normally talks about. I didn't know it was going to be a 5-hour debate on abortion. I had no idea it was literally going to be. There's no way that I would agree to a 5. There's literally a joke in my community that abortion and veganism are the two topics that I just don't debate that much because they're so obnoxious to me. I wouldn't have gone if it was that. But then it ended up being that, and of course, obviously, there are other people that want to debate, and it's like usually one debate like leads to other debates, and I'll do it. But it's not like, okay, I can't wait to make abortion and veganism like mainstays of like my debate platform for the next like few months. Right. It was just a thing that I
mean, look, that's fair. That's fair enough. I mean, I will say that it has obviously sparked a lot of, I think, controversy in terms of people like the pro-lifers obviously getting mad. I think vegans, I think vegans are more confused at your position. I think, like, I will say, like, from my experience with the vegan community, it's more of the fact, like, in the vegan gains conversation in the first one, you'll say something like semantic and understanding, and by that you meant qualia.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. There's a whole bunch of like terminology and verbiage that I could clarify. I don't care to. I don't care for the conversation. I don't care to. Some of my positions might even seem inconsistent or whatever, and they might be. If I were to take like some weeks to like measure out, like finitely detail, like these are the exact blah, 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 then I could probably do that and have a more consistent or clear stance. But I just don't care. I have zero care whatsoever. There's probably people who hear me talk about computer science and get triggered when I say something's wrong. They're probably like, there's a ton of topics like that I don't know everything about. This is just a topic that I super do not give a fuck. Like spending a whole bunch of time like investigating and weeding out like all my thoughts on it because I just don't care that much about it. And I'm sure there are a ton of vegans that feel a certain type of way about it, and that's totally fine, but I don't.
I mean, like, look, I get it. I will say this, right? I think that in some respects it seemed like, from my position of watching like the abortion debates, and sometimes when you're debating vegans, it seems like you care a lot. And then I think that there's other times when it's convenient not to care.
Well, I think that those times, when do I care?
Like, you're invested.
I mean, like, I'm invested. If somebody gets on the server and starts like shouting at me or whatever, I'll care whatever. But I'm not like invested. Like, guys, we're gonna spend a lot of time like contemplating veganism and abortion. No, I don't think I've ever done like a full research stream on like abortion or veganism before. I don't think in my entire life.
It seems like you care about the consequences of people living their lives in relation to these two ethical dilemmas. Like, if someone is if pro-life was to proliferate across the United States, it sounds like you would care about it, right?
Yeah, probably. But none of these conversations about people that are pro-life or pro-choice are getting to this level of depth ever for policy discussion.
Well, I mean, like, Trent got pretty deep, I think.
Trent is not an average person. Trent has a master's in philosophy, biology, and Catholic theology.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, to be fair, that is fair enough. So is that the only reason that you would say so? Like, in relation to this, it's more of the fact that you think that this could be resolved, like normally resolved at a more shallow level, and you can't be fucked to go deeper.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't see that as maybe as a little, like, it's just more of the fact that it's just like a total convenience thing. Like,
yeah, there's only so much time I have to do certain things, and this is just not how I want to spend my time doing on this particular.
I understand that. Like, obviously, like, you know, I'm sure there's things that I could care more about, but I don't. You know, like, I'm not really invested in I don't know, like NATO spending or something, right? You know what I mean? But I'm pretty sure it's important. So I get that. Like, it just comes to the point of like, I'm not saying don't do the debates, but I'm saying if you're taking such a fervent stance against someone who, like, for example, you believe is knowledgeable, or like even against like vegan gains, where it's about something that you've even admitted to be super complex and intricate, why take such a hard stance? Like with me, you've went, I don't know, I don't give a fuck. When
I'll
I
present
pushed
my
you.
opinion, and I
You
present
know
my
what I
opinion
mean?
here. But like vegan games, he jumps in here to shout at me about things. I'm not like DMing him like, "Hey, we should have a debate on this topic."
Fair
Or
enough.
he comes in here, he wants to shout me something like, "Okay, what do you want to talk about today, or whatever?" And then I'll give my spiel or whatever about it. And then sometimes it drags into a longer thing. But it's not like I'm seeking him out for these conversations. He just has perms to jump on my Discord. Somebody jumps in and he shouts at me over things. Like that's it.
So, but in the long run, like, is it just that like you sort of, humor in them, or is it that like, because I don't know, like I'm not like sort of like it's sort of meta debate, right? I don't want to fucking pull into it, but it just seems like it seems that you give a fuck about the consequences. It seems that you give a fuck about the idea of you like harming children and or harm to children and harm to humans and shit like that. And right now you're caught between these two communities that both think you're being inconsistent, and you sort of rather than resolving that inconsistency whilst engaging in debate, like so fervently taking like such a very specific fucking stance, by the way, where like it's not even just it's not even just consciousness, it's a kind of consciousness. It's not that it's a human, right? It's not that it's an animal. It's this very specific phenomenal experience which may really, let's be honest, not even exist in infants, but you would still not be okay with it. So there's all of this, right? That is your baggage in this sort of scenario, right? And I get that's fine, right? Because these debates are complex as fuck. Researchers debate them for years. Like one of me mods came in and basically said, I don't think like Vegan Gains or Destiny could have this conversation. And I responded, I'm not sure who could have this conversation when we're talking about the philosophy of mind and neuroscience to the point in which brain is conscious and which isn't. Like, I don't know who the fuck go, oh yeah, actually that one, I can tell it from the photo. Like, so I get that this is complex as fuck, but then why not just go, actually, I don't know why I hold this position. I maybe need to introspect some more, maybe look
Because
into it.
I think that my position is good for 99% of conversations. But if somebody wants to argue like the hardcore intricacies of like veganism, whatever, probably not going to get there. But for 99% of people I talk to, I think that my positions are perfectly coherent. I think they're perfectly consistent. I think they get it. The meat of like that particular conversation for abortion, like just fine. Like, is it going to do good enough for like professional like vegan debates? Probably not. But 99% of humanity is not at that point, so I don't care about it. It's not.
But it's not even professional because like it's like, and I know that Trent isn't like the average pro-lifer, but I mean we're talking about like he wasn't running like some fucking super complex shit. He was just saying why is it human and not consciousness. And then when it's sort of like you're caught between these two fucking places, man. To the point in which
I'm not. Hold on. To be clear, I'm not caught anywhere. I might be caught in servers where people are copy pasting 72 million like name the trait arguments or the 52,000 genetic fallacies that like sure. Okay, I'm just saying that like I'm not caught anywhere. I think for the vast majority of people, I can have the conversation will be fine. I'm sure there are hardcore analysis debate servers where people are hardcore teasing out the meta-ethical positions of why veganism is like commanded by, God in the Bible and whatnot. That's fine. I'm sure those positions exist.
That would be
but
only
I don't think
me, but
sure.
yes.
I don't think most people, I don't think I'm running into these problems mostly. If I start running into issues everywhere where people are like, oh, well, what about veganism? Well, then fine. Fuck, maybe I need to go back and reanalyze it. That's really going to be the position that most people are going to take. I'd be surprised if that was the case. But then maybe I would go back there. But I don't think that's going to be the case.
Well, okay. I'll just explicate what I think that my issue is then, and I'll just leave it be, right? I think that in terms of the category of human, and you've seen the category of consciousness, is essentially just, it's like, the reason you're saying consciousness is because you want to say that there is a value experience, and I get that. But when we talk about even like when Tom mentioned, let's say the evolution of the brain, where does sort of this human level of experience begin? Why is this experience valuable and that experience not valuable? That's where it all starts to like get so messy. Where I don't think, to be frank, I don't know where you're saying the value comes from. Vegan gains can go, well, all dogs have the same structures of the brain. You're saying it's still not having the same consciousness.
Where does the value? Where does the value for sentience come from?
I would say from the experience of like value. I think it is a value experience.
Why?
That's what it
Why?
is
But
by
why?
definition.
Why would you value them
Because
in anything?
it's
You
one of
can't
the
say
factors.
by
It's
definition because you literally just said earlier my definition was circular. You're literally giving me a tautology right now. I define it as valuable, therefore it's valuable.
Well, no, I'm not saying I'm defining it as valuable. I'm saying that sentience is the value experience because that's what it is. That's what it's feeling something, right?
So?
So that
Why is
means
the
that
feeling that you have over a thing in your brain any different than the feeling of a plant that searches for the sun? Like leaves will grow towards
plants
sunlight.
don't have a feeling. Plants
How do
aren't
you know? What do you
conscious. They
mean?
don't have. What do you mean? They don't have. We have absolutely zero reason to believe that plants are conscious.
Why?
Like
You,
the-
why,
in,
wait,
like,
you,
oh,
earlier
you're the
you
one that
just said
references
earlier
neuroscience.
you just said that like we can look at behaviors. The behavior of like a cat moving towards the sun seems like it wants to be like warm. What about the behavior of plants growing towards sunlight, looking for energy?
Plants grow towards sunlight in a way that's autonomous. An animal makes a behavioral distinction based upon competing values.
You have no
So, like,
idea
it's
if
like,
that's true for a cat or dog. It could be literally just the same. Like this
we have
stimulus
exactly
produces
the
this
same
effect.
reason. We have exactly the same reason to believe it's true for a cat or dog as we do for another human.
No, you
That's
don't.
my whole
What do you
point.
mean?
Yes, we do.
Why?
What's the difference?
The difference is they're cats and dogs, and we're humans.
Right. Oh, okay. So, like, what the difference? What's the difference between a cat and a dog? Like a category? Like a fucking word? Like, what does that mean? Like,
Biologically, they're the structures of their bodies and the thoughts that they're capable of producing and the way that they're capable of socializing with each other are completely, totally different.
okay, yeah, they've got different social capabilities and they've got different biological standpoints, but why would that indicate one is conscious and one isn't in relation to humans being conscious and animals aren't?
I don't know.
Like,
You're the
why
one.
would
I was
go-
just trying to get at what you were saying. It's you because you seem to come from this
Okay,
ground of
I
like
would
having
say
like
that,
an
like-
objective
No, no.
valuation of like sentient experience, and
How
then
do
you're
we
making fun of me
understand
for having like a
subjective
subjective value. And I'm like, I feel like at the end of the day, ultimately, it's all pretty subjective. Like I don't think this unless you're religious and you've got like some divine revelation or whatever. But I don't think you can say that like your position is any more objectively grounded in fact than any other person's.
I mean, I don't think. I think you could be a secular objectivist, like a moral realist. I don't think that you don't have to be.
Okay, well, if you're going to be a secular
but, like,
objectivist,
but
then
that's
objectively
separate to
cooking
what we're
meat
even
tastes
talking
good.
about. Like,
So if there was
you're
ever
saying,
secular
like,
objective moral values, then it must be that eating animals is good because they taste good when you cook them. Like if we're going to be secular objectivists.
No, that's not how that would work. Like you could say because like rape might feel good. That doesn't mean everyone should do it. Like but the thing is that like when we look at the like why we would say that a human is conscious and a dog is conscious or not conscious, and then a plant is like not conscious, and we look at like behavioral distinctions, and like when neuroscientists do this in the first place, they'll do it with these distinct categories in mind. The fact that they'll go, okay, this seems to have an internal experience which is mediating its environment, which seems to be like indicating problem-solving capabilities, which seems to be reacting to external stimuli, and then learning from previous stimuli and moving towards new and more, better scenarios, or
Would you say
avoiding
that like our fungus?
like a cat.
Yeah. Would you say that a fungus is like conscious using that definition? Fungus can
Fungus
solve.
doesn't have. Fungus can solve problems.
Yes.
How?
Isn't there like a decent bit of research that like I want to say the comparison that was if you put fungus in certain types of environments that they can actually grow to solve for pathfinding in algorithmic ways that I don't even know if we have computer systems that can do it yet. Fungus are incredibly huge, complicated organisms that are capable of doing a lot of. There's like
Are capable of essentially modifying their behavior based upon non-reactive responses, where it's not just increased stimuli, path of easiest resistance, and instead shows like a consideration of various alternatives.
When you say
especially-
consideration, you're normatively loading stuff that might just happen normally. Like a rock might choose to flow one way or roll down a hill one way versus another, but it's just gravity acting upon it. The same way that a cat or a dog might choose to eat one piece of food over another, but just because there are neurons in their brain that are like driving them in that direction. It's all causal at the end of the day.
No. I mean, you can change. You can even control this. You can. There's psychological experiments on animals which change certain neurological conditions, which, for example, pain receptivity, where they inhibit pain receptivity to demonstrate that an animal does experience pain. So you give an animal essentially something which would stop pain receptivity and they stop responding to that stimuli and will continue to eat food even when it would normally be painful, or they'll be more willing to take certain actions in relation to, like, for example, I know Jordan Peterson loves to talk about this sort of weird shit where they'll give like essentially an animal a drug, and it'll become more like a lobster a drug or some
Yeah,
shit,
all
and
you're
it'll become
talking
more
about are,
confident
it
and
feels like all you're
abrasive.
talking about are changing the inputs of the equation here. So pushing the
In the
rock to the
same way
left
that
or
you could,
right.
the exact same way that you could say with a human. We're talking about a central nervous system. We're talking about it modifying its behavior in relation to an environment, in relation to a
Yeah, I'm
collective
not
goal.
asking
Like
you
it's
to
an
compare the difference between
organism.
animals and humans. I'm just trying to figure out where does this objective value for animals
No,
come
I'm
from
saying
over
like
animals over like rocks or plants? Because you're the one that's telling
what
me
we
that
were.
there's some objectively different answer.
No, but what I'm saying is that in terms of behavioral analysis for consciousness, we have exactly the same reason to say that an animal and a plant, sorry, an animal and a human is conscious. Like we have nothing. You said there is absolutely no difference. I'm just saying what would indicate the difference and where is it? Because all of language, for example, is going to be based on behavioral analysis. Like it's all going to be like, are you indicating a certain belief state within your actions in terms of its development? Like that's like a proposition is just a belief in which you're aware of. Like you've become aware of your own beliefs. So it's like a level of self-awareness. So the belief had to pre-exist to form the linguistic structure in the first place, where you'd indicate. This is where like Wittgenstein would say like you start indicating like slab, and the other person goes slab, and you just have the shared goal of like building something, and we'll start talking about semantics and shit. But for all of that semantics to even happen, you had to have a goal. You had to essentially have a belief state in relation to that goal, and then you're essentially engaged in a form of communication. So I'm just wondering why the fuck you'd go, oh, you know, this animal here, this dog, cat, dolphin, chimpanzee, these are very complex social animals engaged in highly communicative behavior, seem to respond to their environment that shows problem solving skills. And neuroscientists all almost unanimously all say animals are conscious and having an experience. But then you'll go, not that experience, that's not the same kind. And you'll make this hard fucking distinction between them and us.
Why do you
And
think
it
it's
just sounds like
reasonable
it's
to
pseudo
assume?
religious.
Okay, it
It's
is.
pseudo, it's like a human soul, right?
True.
Like honestly, like a Christian will do it. They'll go, oh, well, the lack of human soul made in the image of God. Like that's like, do you know what I mean? That's how it seems to me.
Okay, maybe I'm making my way back to Catholicism then, you know?
No, I'm not saying you are. Like, I'm just wondering, like, because that's how I'm approaching it. Because, like, it seems to me that normally, if I was to give an evolutionary case, like 9 times out of 10, a neuroscientist or an evolutionary psychologist, an evolutionary biologist, they think we're the same thing as animals to a higher degree. It's not that there is this massive categorical distinction. Yet you want to make out, like, no, ethics starts here because there is this massive categorical distinction. And I want to know why.
I don't know, man. Just seems like humans are a thing. Where else do we want to go with this?
No, look, I'm not gonna fucking press you all night. Like, I appreciate you even just taking the time to talk to us, and you know, like, I'm not gonna try and push this too hard, but it does just, all I would ask is that you reflect on why you consider one category valuable and the other category not, and whether this approach even aligns with an evolutionary biological take. In the first place, because it seems like this approach to me seems evolutionarily counterintuitive. It seems just essentially, even in terms of the philosophy of mind and phenomenology, sort of arbitrary, where you're like, there's just a distinction. I don't know where it's coming from. So I'm just wondering, like, why all of these like, maybe just consider that, maybe like maybe just work out why you're giving these experiences to humans but not to animals. Because if it does turn out that animals have these experiences and you've been killing them all along, and you say that you value these experiences, you're gonna, you know, like, that's pretty fucking shit, right?
True.
Okay. Well, thank you for chatting to us anyways.
No problem. Tom, what do you got for us?
I mean, I still would like to understand it. Like, just take my position, okay? We value humans because they're human. We're social animals. We like humans. We like to be around humans. We have sex with humans. We are able to talk to humans. Like, everything that we do is going to be with other humans. And it seems like chimps and bonobos and all other primates act similarly and value their own kind similarly. Why would that not be the case if we're just valuing humans because they're humans?
Wait, are you asking perspective philosophy or me?
You.
Sorry, repeat that again.
If why aren't we just valuing humans because they're human? Like we talk to humans, we have sex with humans, we engage with humans, we work with them. Bonobos, chimpanzees, so like all other primates seem to value their own kind just because it's their own kind. Why aren't we valuing our own kind just because it's our own kind?
I mean, fundamentally, maybe that is the argument, right? You're valuing humans value human conscious experience because we're humans that have conscious experiences like humans. That might be the case, maybe.
Sure. I have trouble with consciousness because I just don't even know if maybe I just don't understand it enough. But like I feel like the fact that we build things and like we can build buildings and talk and move our mouths completely different than any other animal. It seems like our consciousness is completely different from any other animal. Do you not believe that? Or perspective philosophy, where like how do you separate our consciousness from our intelligence?
I think intelligence has a causative effect on consciousness to the point in which we could say that the greater syntactic development in terms of like the application of like, categories of the understanding, so concepts, the application of concepts, which I would take to be like specific mental abilities. So when you apply a mental ability, like because of having a greater intellectual capacity, you're going to have a different experience, right? Or you're going to be able to sort of at least sort of take parts out of that experience and focus on them and develop them into new and varied experiences. But that doesn't mean that your experience of value has radically changed. It just means that you're capable of experiencing new and varied values. Like, you already had the valuation to then create these new categories in the first place. These are just different values where I do think humans have a richer, more complex, sophisticated experience than animals, typically. Maybe not dolphins and primates massively. I think they have pretty sophisticated experiences, but I think humans can, have infinite, almost conceptual development. And it's just a matter of time before we get more and more sophisticated. But that doesn't mean that our evaluation of our experience was determined by it being structured a certain way. It was already being valued, which is why it is now structured that way, and why we're looking for these richer, more complex and sophisticated systems, which is why, as Christians or as Aristotelians, whatever, you could be an Aristotelian atheist, I don't really care, you would say that you're looking for flourishing, right? You're looking for this like sort of eudaimonic, rich, developed experience of maybe something like a million higher pleasure, where it's like actually like the experience of Shakespeare gave me an experience of beauty. Like it's an artistic experience which is amazing, but it's only because of our animalistic nature that we're capable of developing to these heights in the first place. Reason is important, but it can't do it alone. Consciousness plays a vital role in this, and without the category of animality, humans can't be understood. The genus of animality contains the species of humanity, and so there's no reason to think that we would have any understanding of human consciousness without first attributing base animalistic indications of pleasure, pain in relation to really narrow or really sort of simple categories of categorical relationships to our environment, like heat, sensitivity, all of the
Sure,
the
but
basic
that doesn't make sense because we can actually experience the things, like more things than animals. It's
Yeah.
not just like the
I'll be back
understanding
one
of
sec.
it. Like understanding the thing is part of the experience, like being able to understand science, the fact that we can even like know where Earth came from and how it got here. We can
Mhm.
understand evolution, like
Yeah.
that is part of the experience. I don't think that you can completely separate the intelligence
I
from
don't think it's part
the
of the. I don't think it's not
consciousness.
part of the experience. Like, of course not. Like, I don't think. I think what makes us human is having this rational capacity, and that's. I mean, that's like when Destiny, for example, talks about this idea of human consciousness. I don't actually think he even means human quote unquote consciousness. I think he means rational consciousness. And I think, for example, if we were to come into contact with an alien who was very similar to us, I doubt Destiny's going to be like, that doesn't matter. It does matter to him because he's saying that it has this sort of rich conscious experience. What I'm calling into question is, where does the value of this rich conscious experience come from? Or why are we even seeking these rich experiences? They're not for their own sake, they're for our sake. as essentially a united being. It's because we care about our experiences. It's not that we care about a specific experience of beauty or redness or whatever, because it doesn't even make sense unless it's placed into the sort of life of an animal. Like, unless I go like, actually, I'm having a conscious experience of the world, and during that conscious experience, one thing feels good, one thing feels bad, and now we can sort of put these things together in more and more complex ways, and we have, Mozart or some shit. Like, that's essentially what a human experience is. It's just a more complicated animal experience. The value was already present. We're just expressing the value in a different way.
Well, the value is subjective, though. I don't know what you mean about the
Like, the
value.
subject is the value. It's like, there's a guy called Tom Regan, and he argues that, and he's a Kantian, right? How do we understand the value of a specific end? Like, an end is, or like, let's say pleasure, pain, whatever. It's in relation to a goal, essentially, like end setting. It is a rational categorization, but it's a categorization based upon the unified experience of a subject. So like, a subject having an experience is what is valuable. Like, the experience, if you remove the experiencer, is meaningless. Like, it doesn't not only is it incoherent, but it doesn't have any value there. Like, redness in a vacuum isn't anything. Redness on a rose when someone is looking upon it and having a reaction to it is what is valuable. It's not in the redness, in the rose, in the object. It's in you. You are the value that's being expressed, not the experience itself. Which is why I don't like consequentialism, because I think consequences are conditioned from the subject and not the other way around.
I completely disagree with that. I think that we decide what it is that we value. We choose what it is that we value, especially within, like, morals are only there because we decided that they were beneficial to us within a society. So
All right.
we're creating a
Why? How did we
society
decide that?
by engaging in societies and testing
So
what works and
why did
what
we
was actually
why did
beneficial.
we engage in society? And two, like,
Because it was beneficial.
how was it beneficial's a moral term, right?
Yes, like, meaning that we were happier working together, each person doing their
Happier.
own job, each person taking part within a society and acting as a cog within the system. Each, like, it just happened to be more
So
beneficial for us all to
so
engage within a
if it was
society.
more beneficial, so if it was more good, because beneficial just means resulting in good, favorable, advantageous. So if it was more good for us to live in society, doesn't that mean that the good existed before society?
No, it means that our subjective value, like, that is one thing that we subjectively value. There could be something better that we happen to value more. There's just something there that we actually enjoy. Like, we have
So it's
better
not
quality
society
of
now, it's
life.
subjective. So it's not society it comes from the subject.
Well, I'm saying that we value society because of the subject.
Okay, so why does the subject value, like, so how does the subject determine what it values?
Um, I don't know that I can actually answer that. That
So
it's
I
just
think
based
there's
on.
two real ways to work this out in terms of how the self comes around in terms of our values. I think you can take a Humean way of going around it and saying it's from the passions, that we are given values based on um, non-cognitive natural stimuli, right?
Sure, the values are there. Well, so that is what I would say, is that there is something within our brain that is stimulated based on certain circumstances, and so we just happen to value those things because our brains are stimulated. But that doesn't mean that there's not something else that would stimulate
Is
our
there
brains more.
Okay, and is that done in a way that makes, does it conform to a nature or anything, or is it just sort of arbitrary?
It is, well, our brains are natural, so it would be nature.
So one, this, we're not choosing our values now; we are being given them by nature. I'd like to point out, and two, if they aren't arbitrary and like they're not just sort of random, then they have a specific end, which means that all subjects all
Hold on.
have a
I
specific
don't like
end.
the way you said that. Like, I can choose to eat a steak or macaroni and cheese. Both of
Mm-hmm.
them are going to stimulate my brain, but that doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that both of them have the same value to me. Like I can like one at times, and I can like the other at times. There's not this objective value to either one of
But
them.
the objective value is whether you're like, this is the distinction between egoism and psychological egoism and subjectivism. A subjectivist is going to say that the value is based on either like a non-cognitive expression which pre-exists, which is sort of either arbitrary or like, you know, is sort of happening to me. It's not necessarily valuable to me, and there's no way I can really gain a sort of moral generalism to the point at which it's a moral realism about this. And the psychological egoist or the moral egoist is going to say there is actually a way in which I can work out what is good or bad for me, and that's what's good in general, right? From a individual standpoint, I don't get to choose that. It comes pre-packaged with my nature, but it is objective. Like, I might think taking heroin is good, but I might be wrong. I might be so wrong. I might ruin my life. I might hate it. That's
Yeah,
the
but why do we
distinction.
allow you to make a decision as an individual?
Because your reasoning is based around not just your.
Yeah, but society could choose to not allow you to make decisions as an individual. We could do what only benefits society and have you just do the
I mean
things
that
that
okay,
benefit
that doesn't
society.
even make sense. How would society work out what benefited it if it didn't rely upon the individual reasons who occupy society? Like, the whole point is that
No,
you are
that is my point though, is that we only allow the individual. Let's see. It is beneficial to society to grade things on an individualistic level. So, like, grading each person on individualistic actions and saying whether or not they are doing something right or wrong, that is beneficial to society. That's why we do it on an individualistic level. That not
I think there is a value to the individual. Like, I'm not arguing against the value to the individual. What I'm arguing against is, one, subjectivism, which I've killed at this point, and now I'm arguing against moral egoism. And the moral egoistic standpoint relies upon not the just the individual, because really you could turn this around, right? And this is what I will do. But the moral egoist basically affirms that they have an intimate and already pre-exposed conception of themselves. Like, they know what is good for them and they have access to it. Now, likewise, I would say, are there times when an individual is wrong in relation to themselves, like that heroin addict, and has not acted in such a way as to reflect their own good?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't even feel like you engaged with what I just said. Like, there's movies where they show people all being told exactly what they do, what their jobs are going to be, exactly where to go and how to act, what to eat. Like, they
I
could
don't
make
want
all of these
people to
decisions
be,
for them. I don't want
yeah,
that either, but that's the
I
point,
don't
is
think
that
that makes
we
sense.
do happen to do this based on an individualistic level because we think of ourselves as individuals.
Look, I'm an individualist, right? And I think that the human reason necessarily includes, like, the consideration of the collective reasoning includes the individual, as in the and this is basically the point of going, like, when I make a judgment about myself and others, does it have value? If it doesn't have value, then this is a tyranny. And in a tyrannical situation, then we're relying upon the reasoning of one person, which is not also more likely to be flawed, but is essentially going to be based around uh, and alienating all of the evidence and value of another person's experience. And so it is necessarily going to be irrational. That's why I don't like tyrannies, because they're irrational. If you had, like, if you could imagine there was a system of governance which stepped in only when you did something necessarily irrational, and it was 100% accurate every time. Like, for example, a god, for example, who went, "Do not do this thing. Going it's going to mess you up." And in this specific instance, like, he's told you time and time again, do not do this thing, is going to mess you up. Now, he can either let you do it or he can stop you. Now, if, let's say, you're doing it not because you're like willfully disobedient, or it's because you just don't understand what you're doing, right? Should he should he correct your behavior? Should he, I don't know, send someone hypothetically to correct your behavior, tell you you're doing the wrong thing, explain that it's wrong, and try to convince you otherwise, or impede, or even like more drastically, impede upon your free will in a situation, well, impede upon your volition to reflect your free will, to reflect your reasoning? Do you think that would be justified?
No, I would, but I've already explained why I think that we engage as individuals. It's not. I don't think it's just because of the ego, but because that's what's like beneficial to society. Like
You say
it's.
beneficial to society, but you think that's the ego, mate. So I don't know.
No, I'm saying that we have egos. Just because we have an ego doesn't mean that that's necessarily why society decides to grade things as an individual. Like that,
So
we
where
a
do you
lot of
think?
this came through like liberalism and the Enlightenment period and crap like that. Like it wasn't like we always, uh, looked at things the way that we do today.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, like, look at the egoism from the whole point of the egoism from the Enlightenment period was to boil us down to animals making decisions in relation to a passionate nature. So, like, the egoists are like the closest allies you're gonna have, apart from the subjectivists. But you argued against subjectivism before. You said like, no, there is a nature. So if there's a nature, then it's, and I'm assuming you're saying it's particular, then you're an egoist. Like that's, I'm so I don't know what to
No,
tell you. Like,
I didn't, because I explained that like I can sometimes I want steak, sometimes I want macaroni. Like both are going to give me stimulus, but that doesn't mean that like if one gives me more stimulus, it's objectively better, because I'll still choose to eat macaroni other times. Like it's not I don't think
right.
that there's this like
So,
objective good in one
but
or the
why are
other,
you?
because I can still make the decision between both of them.
Why are you making the decision? Because I'm assuming we're boiling this down to the passions. It's going to end up being passions are making the decision, right? So why are you
Yeah,
making the decision?
It 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 depends on the moment. Sometimes I'll choose one thing, sometimes I'll choose the other. Like I don't know. It is just subjective. Like I don't know that I can boil it down any more than that. Because from what you're saying, it's as though I'm going to choose steak literally every time. I'm going to choose steak
No,
literally
of
every time
course not.
because it gives me more stimulus.
I think you're going to ask yourself the question. You're going to go, all right. I ate steak like twice this week. I'm not really feeling it right now in relation to like what I've already ate or what I'm fancying, and so you're making a rational decision and you're ordering your desires in relation to reason, right? And I would like to point out like this isn't. I haven't even like. There's a point of going that not only would all none of these desires be like if we just say that they're irrationally prepackaged and you just sort of feel you're not making a decision, it just happens, and you remove all human volition. So I'm assuming that you are going to make some sort of rational decision in relation to what you feel, and that's going to be based around like a holistic experience of a human life. You want to live a good life. Eating the macaroni this time will let you live a better life, rather than the steak. Like it's pretty much that. That's the difference between egoism and subjectivism. But look, in this respect as well. Like, I think that there's worth saying. Like, I think you said to Destiny, and I think it's kind of funny because you said to Destiny, why don't you value the category of human, right? And why do you just value human consciousness? Yet, when we're talking about ethics, we're boiling all of this down to feeling. And it all boils down to feeling. It doesn't boil down to abstract rational categories, right? That an objectivist would say. It boils down to how do you feel? So I'm like, would it not even make more sense in relation to your position to be more like Destiny, where you value human consciousness and the experiences of conscious people? Because whether it's for pragmatic use or something like Destiny says, or like what he feels about it, like why would you value, I don't know, like the rational like the category of human?
I don't know that I can separate why I would value humans from any other animal outside of the fact that like because I think consciousness in and of itself isn't going to be enough. There's the intelligence, there's the social factors, there's like a ton of other things outside of just consciousness that I think that we value in those scenarios.
I think that in relation to
And
your system, there is only one thing you value, and that's your experiences. And that all of this is built up of a complex, sophisticated attribution of how you think you're going to feel about something, right? So all of this, it's not that you value humans, it's not that you value any specific category, it's that it would make you feel a certain way, and that's what it boils down to. So that's like unless you're saying it doesn't, unless you're saying there is something else, there is some other reason as to why one should value a category of human, or why you even think you could value that category. The only thing I'm getting from you is that you have a passionate response. That passionate response relates to how you feel, and ultimately you feel a certain way about a zygote, and Destiny doesn't. So when you say like, why does he feel that way about human consciousness? Because for the same reason that you don't feel that way towards animals, but you feel it about that collection of cells, he doesn't feel it in relation to a human zygote, but does to a conscious experiential agent.
Well, real quick, Steven, I know you got to go soon, so I'm not gonna make you sit through this. I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, what's up?
I was saying if you need to go, you can hop out. I
probably got like 5 or 10 more minutes, so yeah, go for it.
Okay. Okay. So I like I said, I think it's going to be too complicated. I think it's going to be like I think it's going to be something essential to just being human, that we value other humans. Just as like, I don't think we could explain exactly why a chimpanzee values other chimpanzees, or why they hang around other chimpanzees. I don't think that we would put it down to like their consciousness. I think that would be a little bit too simplistic. Like there's something that automatically makes them engage with one another as soon as they're born. So I think you're oversimplifying it to just say that it's only the consciousness.
Is that to me or to Destiny?
Yeah, you're the one who's saying that that's what
Right,
I ought
okay.
to value, and so I'm explaining like why I wouldn't. I
think
think
that
because even just like rationalizing things as well, like I think that there.
I think that, yeah, but
change.
like, look, the whole point is that what you're saying is that in terms of your rationalizing, it's just based off how you feel about your passions. So like, chimpanzees do the same thing, right? Like in terms of building communities, like in terms of rationally categorizing, like these categories are that you're building are just categories of how you feel. In the same way, like don't get me wrong, I think that like I'll happily argue for a moral realist stance. I just don't think that your stance can call Destiny into question at all. That's what I'm pointing out. So like I like Destiny, I think Brent's stance probably could, because Brent was basically arguing for a Catholic stance, which means his thinking of what something is right or wrong is beside the point. One, it's objective, even secularly, or two, it's God. So like the way that he's going to approach it is objective. Like there isn't like there is a right and wrong. It's not about how you feel. What I'm saying is that if this is all about how you feel, this is all a complex bullshit game. In which we essentially...
Are you doing the like it's subjective, therefore like it can just be anything?
I'm saying it's subjective, so it's subjective. Like you have one subject and you have another, and if they feel differently, then they feel differently, right? And I don't even think it works out in the end. I think subjectivism falls apart. I think that the subject...
But we can rationalize and make arguments for one over the other. Like just because it's subjective doesn't mean that it's all exactly
the
same.
Rationalizing is ad hoc based on your own already preconceived preferences, based on things which you can't control. That's definitionally non-cognitive. Or it's something you can control, and you have to explain to me where it comes from. And you just said your passions.
No. I don't think that I can explain. Why we value something is different than me trying to explain why we value that thing. Like, one way or the other, Destiny and I both value humans. we're both just trying to rationalize why one values or why one believes we value them differently than the other. Yes, it is all post hoc, obviously, but that doesn't mean that we're valuing different things. We're just trying to explain
No,
why we
you are
value. Like,
valuing different things because it's not that you actually value the thing, you value your experience of a thing. That's the whole subjectivist spiel. It's an expression of your own emotional states. It's necessarily separate to him. And also it was it's Trent, not Brent. I'm sorry, sorry I did that. But like the like it's his emotions are separate to your emotions. If you're saying that you're a moral subjectivist or even an egoist, he can basically just tell you to fuck off. That's basically that's the end of it. The only thing that you could do otherwise is appeal to his specific emotional states, where you go, well, don't you think you feel this way, maybe? Or would it not be advantageous for you to agree with me? Because anything else is essentially you just trying to impose what you consider valuable onto another subject, which is either going to be a category error for a subjectivist or well, actually, yeah, it's just a category error. Or a form of prescriptivism where you're actually trying to psychologically manipulate them in order to gain your own end. And so you're just using destiny as a way to try and forward your own emotional states. That's kind of it, right? That's it. So yeah. And
if we're both
think,
looking, we're not just talking about ourselves, though. Like, you're talking about it in terms of egoism, as though we're saying, I value this, and I'm trying to explain why I value this. Whereas
well,
we're not. We're talking about why humans value humans.
well, I don't think that Destiny. Do you talk about all humans valuing humans when you talk about why you value human consciousness?
I'm usually just trying to get at where our moral intuitions pointing, and why do we value the things we do? Like where do they point to, basically? Yeah, not the whys.
Yeah, that's
we
the
just
same
do.
thing.
I don't think there is a why.
Right. You don't think there is a why, so it just boils down to how you feel.
Yeah, and then I make the assumption that other humans probably share the same intuitions. Hopefully.
Right. And if let's say they absolutely didn't, is there anything you can do about it?
Yep. Kill them.
Okay. Are you going to kill him, Tom?
I think you have to.
I mean,
I think
if they're not capable
humans,
of reciprocating morals,
there are
then
certain humans that,
you don't have much of a choice.
Yeah, there are certain humans that don't like reciprocate certain like feelings or don't have similar intuitions. Like if somebody has the intuition that murder or rape is good, then yeah, you have to remove them somehow, right? Either kill them or lock them away or exile them.
Yeah, so it's just an ego relation. You're trying to either use them as a means to your end, in which case this is all essentially either a threat of a show of force at the bottom, or it's I'm going to try and convince you feel differently. So that's it.
But that's the same as just existing within a society in the first place. Like, yes, we all
No, it's not. I would go so far as to say that I think that all of this is absolutely nonsense. I think the conception of like you value something and you have intimate knowledge of that is absolutely nonsense, because it doesn't even reflect how human psychology develops, or even how psychology develops in terms of group interrelations in the first place. The reason that like the way in which you develop what is positive or negative in relation to your life is based around how you understand yourself, which is based off a group conception of the self which you've internalized. So no, I wouldn't make this all subjective.
You're
I think
doing
that's a lot
the
of
words
nonsense.
like group subject. First of all, no one said any of this is subjective, I don't think. Unless by subjective you mean just like the subjects looking at things, which is a way that I don't think either of us are using subjective. Yes. But the just because I don't know if it's arbitrary or random, just because a group of people all tend to share the same intuitions.
Well, unless are you like I asked, like, is this boiling down to like a sort of rational categorization, or is this just how we feel?
I think at the end of the day, it's how we feel. The rationalization will come afterwards.
Right.
I'd make a comparison to like music theory. Like you can't use music theory to make somebody hear things a different way. You would just use it to explain why we hear the things that we do. I think morality is the same way.
But then, like, unless you're saying that there is a specific moral sense, and this is like a form of intuitionism, in which case neither of you are subjectivists. It's a non-natural, like a non-naturalist objectivist, where you're like, no, don't you see there is goodness there? And then when someone doesn't see it, you're like, oh, we've got a broken one. Like, you know, like it's not that there isn't actually goodness there. Like you'd be saying that no, human consciousness is objectively valuable. And it doesn't matter how I feel. But it sounds like both of you want to go, I feel a certain way, and based off those feelings, we talk about it, and if we don't agree, we'll murder each other. Like or at the very extremes, anyway. because so it's either an egoistic take.
I mean, what
where
you've
you have
just
intimate
described
knowledge.
is basically the history of the world, right?
No, I don't think so. I think that we have levels of cooperation. I think we have
I'm sorry, it's not the
sophisticated.
history of the world, people with dissimilar views on how the world should be ran constantly fighting and murdering each other?
No, I think diplomacy has existed for, well, since, I think you see diplomacy even in animality. I think like even like you get like for example, like look at when nearest relatives like bonobos. Bonobos mediate most of their conflicts with sex. Humans are
Yes.
incredibly erotic in the same way. We mediate conflicts through marriage and through sexual relations and through group politics, and we don't necessarily, if anything, it seems that we seek to avoid needlessly killing each other. Like we have compassion and care for each other.
How
Like
do we have
in,
how do we not have just one but two different world wars then?
I think
Yeah,
that people can
even
become.
before, like, different tribes fought against each other and killed each other, which is why earlier when we were talking about whether or not I value all humans, I was saying, no, I value the humans around me, but I don't value all humans. Like, I just want the rights that, I want rights extended to the people around me, so I'm going to extend them to other people because other people care about those people. But I obviously don't care about all humans. I don't value all humans.
I think I think that like if you don't value all humans, like talking about like zygotes and stuff and valuing them, I think's mad. Like to be honest, like if you can't even value another walking, talking
It's the
person
same
because they
as what
speak
I was talking
Chinese,
about a second ago.
like
I want it.
like
I want the value to extend to them just as it does to anybody else. It's the
right,
same
yeah. But
argument.
why would you? So like you think
Stop.
like the what?
I think the reason why the
Sorry,
value extends is because intuitively you wouldn't typically value, but our tribes have gotten larger and larger and larger as time goes on. My guess is that initially humankind probably didn't value other humans. You just valued the people in your tribe. That's why you warred with each other. That's why you attacked and killed and stole and enslaved other people. But as time has gone on and we formed larger and larger social networks, the people that are considered part of our tribe has gotten larger. In the past, it might have just been the Bonnells, and then after that, maybe the Bonnell patriarchy, and then after that, small groups, then states, then nations, then, you know, collections of nations. Like the tribes are just growing bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, we're
I think that
rationalizing
no,
all of that. Like
no,
at
you
the
see,
point
like
where it's outside of somebody that I actually can engage with and actually value,
I don't even
I
think that
start to
any of this makes
rationalize it at
sense.
that point.
I don't think any of this makes sense. We would see a shit ton more of tyranny, slavery. We certainly wouldn't be talking about human rights. We wouldn't be talking about any of that.
Yeah, but all of the human rights
Especially,
stuff is incredibly unnatural. It's needed like meta organization to enforce and enshrine that, right? Humans
no, but, like,
themselves don't naturally do these things. We have like institutions now that we've entrusted with
yeah,
power.
but that's, I mean, like, look, I mean, like, I think where institutions are a natural development. Like, I think humans are always going to develop institutions. Like, I think that the man by nature is political, right?
That's
like
great.
the reason
That's
that
great that you think that, but it took like 300,000 years for us to get there. So that's a pretty bold
yeah, I
claim.
mean,
Not only is it a bold
yeah, I mean,
claim, I would say that it's probably not even true. There's probably a higher likelihood that we'll nuke each other out of existence and then in 1,000 years go back to the warring tribes that we had 10,000 years ago. Like right now, as meta organization exists right now, this is a blip in Homo sapien history, and it took us a long time to get here.
Even for the fact, like, look, like we create these like don't get me wrong, like I agree that human history's been, you know, a bloody adventure, but like the development of our consciousness isn't just an arbitrary point in which we've only seek to express our own value in relation to each other. Like when we care about human rights violations in other nations, it's not because it's a social contractual arrangement. It's because it is a universal right in which we extend in general, because we think that it constitutes a part of our being.
We don't extend that in general, though. It has to be shoved in front of our face for it to be extended. Otherwise, we utilize child labor, we exploit other countries, we do all sorts of horrible things that it's not right.
I don't think that's actually the case. I think that in terms of our ethics and our morality in general, I think that
it's you can make the
like,
vegan,
for example,
you
like,
can make the vegan argument for this. How many people eat meat that wouldn't kill a cow?
But the fact that anyone would go vegan in the first place when it clearly has no benefit to you in terms of having some sort of egoistic.
Of course, there's benefit. Some people watch a PETA video and they get traumatized. They don't want to eat meat anymore. Other people have groups of friends that might pressure them to it. Other people feel like they collect social validation for going vegan.
You could just avoid, like, do what most people do: avoid the footage, and pretend it doesn't happen.
Most
and
people do
continue-
avoid the footage, but there are some people I've talked to who have seen footage. I know people that have horrible fucking diets that are vegans today, but they were so traumatized with vegan shit when they were 9 years old. They're just like, I don't think I can eat like animals anymore. Like, it happens. Most
And not
people
just
avoid
that,
it, I agree, but
there's
I
like
don't think that
not just
like,
that, there's a social value to it as well, like being able to feel like you're righteous and you're doing the right thing and being able to tell others that you're doing the right thing. Like there's a lot
even
of
your
different
consideration
aspects
of
to why
what do you
would
even
do
mean
it.
by righteous in the first place. Like when we talk about these like sort of right, like these virtues like righteousness, piety, honesty, like the why we even value any of these in the first place, like unless you're saying that it's all essentially socially manipulative or essentially a way to convince yourself of something that doesn't exist. Like I'm just unconvinced by that, and I'm not even like, to be fair, I think that all of this is ultimately bullshit anyway. I think in terms of even how we could understand ourselves, we are mutually dependent. It's not like when the reason these universal structures develop in the first place is because language itself is a collection of universals. Nouns apply to experiences through time. That's why when we talk about something like psychology, and we talk about I, and we're talking about like the self, we'll relate it to like the first person experience. But the way that the first person experience is unified is through a universal noun, which applies to all of our experiences. It's not like I particularized my experience and from that particular experience just sort of group things together. The particular itself relies upon this internalized universal construct. That's why like you can't like when I say like I'm British, it's not like I've just sort of grew up in this area. It's that I've acclimated social constructs and social development, which is essentially the recognition of other people's experiences and what is good and bad, correct and incorrect, essentially epistemologically, even if you don't think it's, you know, meta, like ontologically, I'd say you have to, but whatever, is it's objective. It's not something that can be subjectively organized. Like all of these values or even the values of yourself in relation to why you care about these categories. You didn't think of these fucking categories. You were given to them as a baby. You think in a way in which somebody else made you think in terms of how you've been developed and raised and exposed to these concepts. And these concepts have formed you a real objective psychology, like not some sort of passionate and dispassionate blob that goes through life just sort of reacting to stimuli. Like,
Say that
because then you're
somebody
not.
else gave us the categories, though. Like, are you saying that we're socialized into an objective nature? Like, what? I don't understand how you can
I
believe
think
both of those
socialization.
things.
I would go so far as to say that your the reason that you would even enter into sociality shows that there is a, like as you said, society is beneficial. There is
Mhm.
something valuable to you that drew you to society. And in society, we're in the process of trying to understand what that value is and work out its nuances.
wow,
But it is
based.
post hoc. Like, we are post hoc, like
It is
rationalizing it and figuring
no,
out why we did it.
it is what you are. It's not like post hoc rationalizing. It's you were probably doing it. Like you could imagine two cavemen like going in entering into a mutually beneficial relationship based around a belief of how it would relate to themselves. But the radically new thing out of this relationship is they could both realize they were entirely wrong, and that what either of them want can't be defined by either side. Like the whole point is that like this is basically where I'd recommend everyone check out Hegel's master slave dialectic, or like even like basically and explain like the concept of mutual recognition. You as a psychology, as a definitive identity, can only understand yourself as an individual because you reject a part of your particularity and you embrace a social common good. You accept your being a member of a species, of a universal. And that's what's been growing over time. Where we see like we had a tribe, that was where universal species. Then we had
There are
a
kids
city.
in
And
Africa
then
that are being
yeah.
socialized into fighting revolutions and killing all sorts of people. And
Yes.
Wait, and then also, I love you guys,
I'll
but I have to take off soon, so it's been fun.
yeah,
Okay.
that's absolutely
yep.
fine.
All
And
right.
thank you
Thanks,
for the
Destiny.
thanks for
Yeah.
the conversation, man.
Be careful, guys. Bye.
Have a good one.
Holy Jesus. Okay, I'm gonna go. I'm glad you got this non-react content today, guys. I'm gonna go take Nathan, hang out with my parents, do good stuff. Be a good human being, you know. Hope you guys enjoyed your dialectics for today.